Peace, family. Thank you for joining us today. I'm glad to see everyone already coming in, getting in the chat. We have a special live today. I'm very excited about it. So I think this is going to be a great live. So as you can see, I have my husband here with me today. It is Just Do It. You know that you see him in the chat, holding the chat down most of the time. But we're having a marriage conversation today. So, we're going to be having that conversation. So before we begin, as always, I want to thank for everyone for coming through. And if you do need a reminder of what we do here at MaatSpeaks. MaatSpeaks is aimed to demonstrate how to maintain, uphold, and build a code and culture through the principles of Ma'at. And those principles are balance, harmony, truth, order, justice, reciprocity, and righteousness. And we begin by applying these principles to ourselves, then extend those principles to our families and ultimately our communities. Now, remember, as you enter, make sure to hit that like button, share this very important conversation, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, you can support this channel in a few ways. As you know, you can support what we do here at MaatSpeaks. You can do that. I'm going to get to it. So you can do that by buy me a coffee or buy me a tea at buymeacoffee.com/MaatSpeaks. You can also donate to the Cash App, which is MaatSpeaks, Venmo, which is MaatSpeaks, and then also Gen Health Revolution. That is my PayPal. That is also my website, which is generationalhealthrevolution.com. And then you can come over and follow me on Instagram at Generational Health Revolution as well. And so just as we get started, I want to go ahead, see who we already have here that has joined us today. So we have my sister. She will be holding the chat down today. Peace, Inya. Peace to you. Thank you for coming through. Always appreciate you. And I will make sure I'm saying your name right. So it's Marjorie. Peace to you. Thank you for coming through. And my sister, Hanifa Naila. Peace to you, my sister. Thank you for always coming through. I appreciate your support. And we have Crypto Vaults. Peace to you, Crypto Vaults. Thank you for coming through. I always appreciate seeing you in the chat and you adding to the conversation. And let's see. Oh, we have Hack back in here. Yes, salute to Black Love. Thank you for coming through. Okay, family, we are going to get started with today's conversation. I'm very excited about this conversation. Today, it's going to be a little different. You know, we're still going to get deep, but it's going to be more in an uplifting and way. We often discuss building within our communities, but sometimes forget the most important part, which is developing Black families. And what creates strong Black families? That's strong Black couples. So my wonderful husband is here with me today. And we also have some amazing Black couples. I think they're pretty amazing. So we're going to discuss marriages, Black marriages, how they have changed over the years as far as, we're in this digital age, understanding cycles in marriage, maintaining balance within our marriage, and then also what leadership looks like in marriage. So before I introduce the other couples to the stage, I always have my disclaimer. And at first I wasn't going to say the disclaimer, but I said might as well. So before we get deep into the conversation, I want to remind you that as you enter, prepare to open your minds. Even when it comes to conversations about relationships and about marriage, I think a lot of times we often approach relationships, conversations about relationships, and we don't like to readjust our beliefs on marriage or relationships because, it can be programming, what we've been taught, even what we see on social media. So we will be discussing what has worked for us, and each couple will talk about what has worked for them, is working for them. And we all can learn from each other, grow, and as far as anyone who is married, in a relationship, wants to be in a relationship, add to the conversation also in the chat, ask your questions. We will love to answer those questions as well. But we want to continue to treat each conversation as a way to consciously heal ourselves, name ourselves in a way that is native to who we are, and build with one another so that we can create a world that our children and future generations do not need to heal from. So, with that being said, let's introduce the other couples to the stage. Okay, so we have none other than my brother and sister Angela and Iyapo. Peace to you. And also my sister and brother, we have Sakile and Vernon. Peace to you as well. So thank y'all for joining me today. Joining us today.
Having us. Enjoying it.
Yeah, we were.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Beautiful platform.
So, before we get started, I would just like you to introduce yourselves. So, starting with Angela and Ayapo, tell us about yourselves. You can tell us, you know, just anything, whatever you want to tell us. You can tell us how long you've been married. You can tell us what you do, your platforms, and what you like to do as a couple. Just whatever you want to tell us.
You want to say?
Sure. Well, I wanted to start off by saying thank you for having us on your platform. And I have learned a lot from watching your channel. I remember when I first started watching it. And one of the things that really struck me was how you were like, as you were like about to do your program, you would like have a little tea. And that's very calming. So I started doing that. So yeah, so I'm going to have some. That was good. So no, I'm a writer. We're both writers, but Angela will get to that. But I'm a writer. I wrote a book called Melanin and other stuff. Why are you reaching for that?
Melanin, a novel.
Help me, Lord. And I know, but there's not a whole lot to me. I write and I'm a cartoonist, and I just know that when it comes to couples, when it comes to this subject in general, there is nothing like Black love. I'm so blessed, and I'll say this will probably go deeper into the conversation, but it's such a blessing to be with someone who understands you and understands what you're going through, not just as a person, but as our people, and can relate to it. So I'm happy as I can be. That's all I know.
Yay. I'm Angela. I am a writer, a facilitator, a coach, metaphysician, a little of this and a little of that. I'm a summer person. And I was born in July, so I'm literally a summer person. And I love beaches. I love hot weather, and I love.
I love it.
Okay, thank you for that. And Vernon and Sakile, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I started off. My name is Vernon Speller, and let's see. I'll let you talk about the children, and let's see. For as far as my background goes, I work in real estate and do real estate investing, flipping properties, and business consulting as well. Help other business owners to get their lives in alignment and get into a flow state in their business and help them in their business as well. me and my wife have been entrepreneurs for, I would say, around 15 years, and together about 20, married about 20 years, and entrepreneurs about 15 of those 20, I want to say. So try to share and do what we can to kind of give back, and as we grow on our journey, try to help other entrepreneurs, other families grow on their journey. And also co-founder, as you see on the bottom on our screen here, Embrace Your Free, with my wonderful wife, my beautiful wife, co-founder of Embrace Your Free, our company, and I'll let Sakile talk more about that. And we have 6 wonderful children, and we're doing a lot of good stuff. I'll let Sakile kind of get more into it of some of the things that we're doing.
Yes, thank you. So I'm Sakile, wife to this amazing man, Vernon, for over 20 years. And like you said, we have 6 phenomenal children together. We've been world schooling them since 2008, which is fun. Together, we were able to complete our 50-state tour, and currently we're on our 100-country tour. Together, we love traveling and experiencing life together and expanding. I'm an avid book reader. I love to read, and I've written over 5 books. So I'm also an author and coach and consultant. So I love to get that information and share. And our company is Embrace Your Free, which basically is created to help people to live and create the life of their dreams. Not one day, not someday, but today, right? So it's really about helping people transform their lives. So we're living the life of our dreams, and we believe that everyone has that dream that's specific to them, that it's meant for them, and it's their birthright to live it. And so we really want to spread that message. So yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm putting the free masterclass at embraceyourfree.com there, and then I also put let's see what else we have here. The success guide, right? Yeah, the success guide.
Yes, free world schooling success guide for you.
Yes. And I put Iyapo's book, Melanin, in the chat. And then I'll put their other information too as well, because they are both authors and do a lot. So I'll put all their information here in the chat as we go along and discuss as well. So putting that in the chat for everyone. So I've learned a lot from my sister here, Sakile and Vernon, and I appreciate y'all. You probably don't know, because I don't be saying so a lot sometimes, but I do appreciate y'all. I really think what y'all are doing is amazing work. So
thank you.
We're gonna get started. Oh well, I guess, do we need to introduce ourselves? So do you want to say what you do? And
so and I'm gonna go back and forth. Y'all, a lot of y'all know me as Just Do It in chat. I'm gonna go back and forth with saying Tracy, but that's my name. If you guys happen to call me that, I quite understand. But I'm a software engineer. Right now I'm really on a journey and just being able to build my skills in software engineering, really to help our community, help our children and things like that. I want to build my skills up in that area to be able to help our community and our children for our future, for the most part. My background from before that was I was pretty much a big athlete. I ended up running track in college and in high school, and I'm still pursuing that to an extent. I'm here in Atlanta. I just joined the track club, so I'm going to end up running here in Atlanta also. So, but other than that, we as a couple have been on a long journey, just from when we first got married at 22 to now, to where we're in our upper 30s now. I don't know if you want me revealing your age.
No, I'm good. I'm confident in my age.
We're in our upper 30s, so right now we're enjoying the journey, and I'm sure we'll touch on a lot of our more of our journey as we speak today. But you wanna?
Yeah, so I've been on quite a journey that this past year with just learning more of who I am through a lot of self development. We have 4 kids, so I do most of the homeschooling, and that is a journey within itself. And I'm going to get into something that Sekili shared with me. Just I needed it. She had already told me, but I needed it again. And that has helped in the past couple weeks as well. But we'll get into that. But yeah, so it for me, it's important for us to learn how to be more independent. Because we want to get out of the rat race, and kind of create a lane not just for ourselves but for our children. We have learned a lot through homeschooling that they have lots of gifts, and so we're trying to make sure that they're able to nurture their own gifts that they want to give to the world. So for me, it's more about what I give to the next generation. So generational health revolution, which is which is that's what I'm holistic health, all of those different kind of things. I'm the holistic health guy, but it's definitely for the next generation so that they are equipped. So that's what the channel is for. And I talk a lot about not having to fragment. Anybody who listens to the channel, I talk about not fragmenting ourselves. And so it's very important that because I'm able to show up in a way that we're able to allow our children to show up in whole. We want to show up whole, as much as we can with all the things that we have to deal with as not just black people, but just living in such a fragmented society as it already is. So, and what that looks like for us. So, having this conversation will also help as well because sometimes I think a lot of people want to learn how to have whole relationships and have nurturing relationships or be able to have certain types of relationships, but they just don't know how to navigate even through like the hard times and things like that. So, that is what it is as far as I don't call myself a healer, but I think us as people, as Black women, that is part of our role is to heal in our own way. So with that being said, we are going to jump right into the conversation. We are talking about, so the main topic is uh, Black marriages in digital ages. So uh, I know I was on Netflix the other day, and how the thing just starts on Netflix, just the trailer just starts even if you don't want to see it. And so there was some show called The Circle, and I don't know how old the show is, but I just saw the trailer and it was talking about how people can be anything that they want to be on social media. And so within that, I started really thinking about how we're in this digital age where you can be anything. You don't necessarily know if that is a person's true story, their true life. You're seeing people's reels, but you don't know what it's taken. Even if they are being their true selves, you also don't know what it took for them to get to where they are in that life. So I really started thinking about how that is when it comes to relationships, because there's a lot of, online dating. There's a lot of, people being somebody else. So I know Angela and Iyapo, y'all met online, not online, but you kind of met on like a social media space. So I want you to kind of like talk about that and how you even felt like you could trust someone that you're meeting online.
Hmm. And not just on a social media space, but this
On-
social media
on YouTube.
on this social media
Mhm.
space where people create videos and they create personas and you frame things up to
Right.
present yourself in a particular way. So yeah, I just want to say that I had a big challenge because I didn't know anybody who knew him. Like I couldn't figure out any connection or any way to vet him other than my personal experience of him, which is something, but it was a little stressful for me even as we got to know each other that I didn't know anybody who knew him. And this is my third marriage, and everybody that I had been married to before, the crowd of two, I knew them. I had some context, I had some frame of reference. There were outside perspectives to, help me to understand what I was experiencing. But with this one,
Yeah. So yeah, we've been married like 3 years. We've been together about 5 years. When we met, that has always tickled me because I definitely didn't have as much of a problem with it as Angela did, especially after we met. And I've said this so many times, but it's just the truth of it is when we met, she she was exactly the way she presented herself. I could say that I lucked out, or however you want to say it, but she was exactly the way that she presented herself. You always learn about people in the course of time, but as far as like the first meeting, and as we got to know each other, as we grew to know each other, uh, there's no phoniness about her. And I tell people who don't know her, I'm like, when you see her online, what you see is what you get. She is exactly that way. She's exactly that way, and I'm just very happy and pleased by that, and I feel blessed.
Mhm. So, can you tell us a little bit, like the journey that it took to get there? So, how did you know that you could trust one another?
um, I don't know. I mean, I think that for me, it's just time and experience, and then
Okay.
just trusting myself. Because ultimately, I kind of feel like as I have dated and as I've been in relationships,
Mm-hmm.
initially when I started dating and being married, I felt like someone could really hurt me or break me down. I
Mm.
guess as I grew and developed as a woman, I started realizing that, marriage, I'm not trying to be cavalier, but marriages come and go, and I can still maintain my integrity. I can still maintain my personhood.
Right.
So I can trust myself enough to, trust what I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing. So it was just through time and experience that, I'm like, I trust this person, or I trust this person enough to take the next step and the next step and the next step.
Right.
So
And
that's
I'm sorry, Andrew.
okay.
Okay. Well, when we met, interestingly, and we said this to Benita. I said to Benita,
Mm-hmm.
was that when we got together, she wasn't looking for anybody. I wasn't looking for anybody, and we were both whole people. We weren't like looking for someone to complete us, or we weren't looking for someone to make us happy or make us feel good. We already were were happy in our lives, so we came together. Um, that just what you call it? You found the happy, pursued the happy,
Yeah, following the habit.
follow the happy.
So I
So
mean,
that's what happened.
we started off talking on the phone and texting,
Okay.
emailing. Eventually, because we were actually in two different cities, and that was another challenge. We were about 3.5 hour drive apart. So Iyapo would come and visit, and so we would spend time together. But it was also kind of challenging because it would take him 3.5 hours to get to Detroit
One way.
one way, and then 3.5 hours to get back. And at that time, he was at school. So a lot of times when he was coming to see me, he still had work to do, and that was already a full
Yeah.
day of driving. So it was kind of like crazy sometimes to be like, so we gonna spend an hour, like it just was kind of hard to make it make sense.
It was worth it.
It was Well, I wasn't doing the driving, but it was hard to like get in that quality face to face time, and then eventually I started spending a little more time in Ohio. I started working in Ohio. And so we were spending more and more time together. And so, in terms of the process of getting to know each other and establishing trust, it wasn't like we came off of,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like as Black folks, as organizers, as people who are community builders, I really am very challenged by having certain conversations and certain interactions when you can't smell a person, you can't vibe a person. Like,
Yeah.
how do you know who you're dealing with? And even when you can smell and deal with a person, but definitely online, how can we build anything
Mhm.
substantial?
Smell a person.
Yeah, you gotta,
Yeah, we're gonna get into that because I think that's what's being lost a lot too during this digital age, the social media, like body language, not being able to be around that person, their mannerisms. There's a lot being lost because a lot of people are just doing the social media thing.
and
So Vernon,
I just want to say this. I want to interrupt, but
okay.
I teach online, so you can see the body language, you can see the facial
Hmm.
expressions. But when I'm talking about the smell, I mean it's like it's something that is
Yeah.
lost through the screen. You just
I see.
it's just lost. You can't vibe a person digitally. You just to me you can't. There's just it's not
So
possible.
I'll say this: I would drive an hour and a half up. I mean, 3.5 hours up, 3.5 hours back, 7 hours just to see her for a half an hour
It
or
would
an
be a
hour.
couple, yeah, it would be a couple hours.
No,
Yeah, that sounds
it's
like
just a half an
the
hour.
beginning of our, our marriage.
Yes.
It was worth it, was it not?
Yeah. Hey, listen. When I tell you, I drove 3 hours from Lafayette back to Monroe, Louisiana, just about every weekend.
And had like maybe like a day. Yeah. Yep, or a few hours, sometimes a few hours. So Vernon and Sakile, you've been married for a while. So was there any type of social media kind of thing going on when y'all first?
Mhm. I'm in the Stone Ages.
Right,
We're just
right.
getting computers.
Like pager.
Well, with that, I didn't even have a phone. Yeah, he had to page me, and I had to go to. They don't even have them anymore. We had to go to a payphone to call him. Yeah, that's how long ago it was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
no
how?
cell.
So what do you think has changed since then? Like when it comes to, do you think it made it better that you didn't have all those types of distractions? Like getting
So
to know each other and stuff like that.
absolutely. And when I felt like I manifested him, so at 15 years old, I was very clear of the husband that I wanted. So I used a very spiritual, intellectual approach where I wrote down like all the attributes. It's over 100 attributes from being chocolate with the gap in the tooth. I'm 5'7", and I'm like, he needs to be like 6 inches taller than an inch because if I wore 6 inch heels, right, he still needs to be an inch taller than me. So that was 6'1". So he had to be at least 6'2", and you end up being
6'3".
6'3". Basketball bill, both. I mean, I was like, I need both his parents to be married, college educated. I needed him to be close to his siblings, have similar spiritual, because I had like this whole list. And so when he did walk into my life, it was just like, I didn't recognize that you were my list, but there was an immediate connection where usually I'm slow to warm to people, but when I met him immediately, I'm like, I like him. Like,
Mm.
I like him. And then later on, I realized, like, oh my goodness, he checks off all of my list, so it's really amazing. So,
The mojo was working that day.
And even when he met me, I was doing all the things that he was looking for in a wife. So we was at work. He was doing he was doing orientation and a new job. And so I happened to bring a home cooked meal to work and I was eating it. I was sitting in by myself. He really liked natural hair. I had an afro. Um, what else? I was reading his favorite author. And he asked me, he was just like, is this for school? And I'm like, no, I just like Richard Wright. I love this book. And he was just like, you can sit by yourself. You eat home meals. You have an afro and you're reading my favorite, So it was
How
like
can I not talk to her? It clearly been placed there just for me. That was a message from the guy.
Yes. So
the universe is talking to me.
In a sense, I feel like that can happen the same way in social media versus in person. You get very clear on who you are and the type of mate that you want and set that intention out. And I really believe it'll come to you in divine timing, when you least expect it. But being clear, I don't care if it was 50 years or 100 years ago or now when there's all the digital, just knowing who you are and what is good for you, what you desire. And I think that will help you override anything.
And I just want to add a little bit to that. That's beautifully said, wonderfully said. Just want to add to it. Also, listening to and being able to even hear your own intuition or whatever you want to call it, connection to source, the God speaking within. But being able to listen to that, because as you mentioned, when you least expect it is a real thing too. Because neither one of us, similar to you guys, we weren't necessarily looking for, I wasn't like trying to get numbers and all that. It was just, like I said, it was just recognition. Like, wow, this young lady is sitting here by herself. Like all the things she just said. I was like, let me just go and say hi to her, just introduce. I wasn't really trying to really shoot strong game and like holler at her. Really, I was joking, but I just had to say something. And I'm so glad that I listened to that intuition. And then going forward, I'm so glad that I listened to the intuition to continue our relationship and really listen to the connection that we had beyond kind of a lot of the expectations and kind of surface things that we're kind of taught to look for and kind of things that we're, kind of social media tells you nowadays, or back then it was kind of music videos and maybe your boys or whatever, TV, movies, beyond all that. And really it was a lot of intuition that really led me anyway in our relationship early on. And my knowingness of who she was, recognition of who she was, and kind of being able to see kind of what we could create going forward. And one of the things when I did kind of have that recognition, one of the things I look for, I'll share this real quick, is kind of related to this, is someone that I could build with. I kind of put it as someone I can build the empire with. And I recognize that as I got to know a little bit better, but also kind of that intuition that I kind of recognized. And it took a minute to get up to my brain is a little bit stubborn, but I recognized that I could build the empire with her. And we have a beautiful empire that we're building currently. So I'm so glad that I listened.
Yes, because I remember when we first met, we were writing letters back and forth. That's how old it was.
Right. Letters. Y'all don't know about that.
Letters.
Not emails.
Not paper in the mail.
Envelope. Stamp.
Wait, did y'all live close to each other?
Eventually,
we did, but I left the area for like a year.
Oh, okay, got it.
We were in school and we were working. We actually met in our job, part-time job we had. We were in school down in a small town just south of Chicago, Champaign, Illinois. And I went back to Chicago for like a year, and we were writing letters. Yeah. And what were you gonna say?
Yeah, I was just saying it was just back in the Stone Age.
But it was like for us, I think at the time when we started conversing, we had MySpace, but it was still a little different because like we met when we were how old? We were like 12, like when we actually met, but we didn't actually date till 10 years later. But I think because we knew each other, it was already like, okay, because once we started, like we actually started conversing, we were married 3 months later. So it was kind of like, it was fast, but I think it's because we knew one another. He wasn't a complete stranger. And that was something that I did put on my list. Like as
Mhm.
you know, my manifestation was, it was a weird kind of thing to put on my list because I was like, it was almost like I didn't want any, I knew I didn't want to talk to anybody that I had already been in a relationship with, but I wanted to be someone that I knew because I was like, it's like crazy people out here. And so we kind of laugh about it that we ended up together because it was something that we both knew. I think we both, that was kind of like something that was both on our list, wasn't it? It was just
Hmm.
like we wanted to be someone we were familiar with, that we were going to be comfortable with, but we knew it wasn't going to be somebody that we had already dated. So it was kind of a strange thing to put. But I think one of the things that you talked about was, that's talked about in these spaces, is how the kind of the vetting process when it comes to the person. And so I know I remember asking you, and you were like, oh, you like, oh yeah, I vetted you, and I was like, why? You already knew who I was. Yeah, so why did you vet me?
Um, well, first of all, like to what you're speaking about, just the familiarity that I absolutely needed that familiarity for, because I had seen through dating, through being with other girlfriends at the time, that the issues in trying to understand, trying to get to know people. And I mean, I think a lot of times that I just understood just the incompatibility with a lot of the people I was with at the time. But to what you guys actually said, I actually prayed at the time, because at that point in time I was Christian, but understanding the universal principles at this point, I understand I was manifesting the person that I needed in my life. One of the things I was asking for was definitely somebody who I was familiar with, and because of that familiarity with her, I think it made it much easier to understand who her family was, who her mother was at the time, and just being understanding of the person I was dealing with. That was really important to me. All the other stuff, when we started conversing and having a relationship, we we clicked like it was nothing. We spoke on the phone probably for 8 hours on
Yeah.
just on end, just from we would get on the phone probably at like 8 o'clock and be on the phone till like 3 o'clock in the morning. So it was, we got a chance to understand who each other was. And once we did that, and I had a easier time just being able to understand some of the deeper things that I definitely needed in a wife. And once I understood that was there, it was an easy decision at that point. Like she said, it was 3 months and we were married. It was an easy decision once I verified and understood like exactly who she was.
So how did you verify? Like, what did you do to vet me?
So I mean, I understood. I looked at your social media. I did. I took a gander at what you were doing, the things that you were talking about on MySpace at the time. I got a chance to understand even some of my old, because what, and let me run that back just a little bit. So I was in Louisiana for a short bit of time. Well, probably for what, 3 years.
Oh, you talking
It
about
was,
junior
yeah,
high?
it
Yep.
was it was
Mm-hmm.
for about 3 years. I was in Louisiana for about 3 years, and that's where we met at. And I had some pretty good friends that were still down there. So I was talking to some of my friends and asking, like, once me and her started to rekindle our relationship, I started to talk to some of my friends and understand who she was, all the things that were going on around her at the time. And that's kind of how I got a good understanding of who I was marrying. And that was really important to me, just because of the other situations and situationships I was in beforehand. So I needed that for myself.
Yeah, so you were asking people around.
basically.
So it's like, I guess that's a good thing because it's one of those things where if he had asked certain people certain, things, and they would have said, because I guess, he married me, so the things were good. So I guess for the other men here, Iyapo and Vernon, did you vet like, was there a vetting process for you?
No, I didn't. I didn't do any betting. It's like I didn't like go online and check it. And this is during a time when you can go on the internet and pay to, see people's background. And I didn't do all that stuff. My betting was actually being in a relationship with her and
Okay.
getting to know her. And that was playing for me. Like, I sound like a broken record, but she is what she seems like she is, and she has a, a kindness and a generosity to her, and a sweetness to her, an intelligence, um, a brilliance and creativity. She's artistic, and she's open. She's very open-minded to the point where, if you hear people in the background, nobody's getting killed. It's soccer season,
Okay.
and we're in Costa Rica, so.
Don't tell the people that. We'll post it, but they're planning. When we had our meeting earlier today, it was all kinds of. I don't know what's going on.
So that's that. If you hear something in the background, that's what it is. I'm sorry. I don't even. But anyway, that's all I'm saying is that she is just a brilliant woman, an artistic woman, and she has opened my mind to so many different avenues of thought and different ways of seeing things and perceiving things and thinking through things. And it has helped me in my writing, and it has helped me in my life. Seriously, and that's so. As far as an actual vetting process, um, my vetting process was just being in relationship with her. So,
Yeah, that's actually a good point, because I would say that would be more of how I vetted. I didn't ask a lot of questions to anybody on the outside. I mean, I didn't even really know anybody around him, because when we started conversing, he was still in New York. So it wasn't, I had known his family from when they were down in Louisiana, but other than that, there was no one to really talk to like that. And so my vetting was more of us within the relationship during our conversations. So staying with the men though, Vernon, did you do a vetting on Sekile?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So with so I get bear with me here. I'll go walk through it. So on the vetting process side, so I'm a pretty systematic person. You'll probably get that when you hear me talking and stuff. I'm pretty systematic. I can be pretty kind of on the
Yeah,
serious
hello,
side.
Virgo. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So on the vetting process side, this kind of goes back to where I was raised. My parents were together 66 years, and I have 14 siblings. There's 10 boys and 4 girls in my family, and I'm in the bottom end. So I got a chance to watch my siblings. I got a chance to really hear from my father and my mother as they were older. My mother was 40 when she had me. My father was 45. So I was kind of at the knee of my parents, who were kind of in their getting into the grandparent stage. I had nieces and had nieces and nephews pretty early in my life. Yeah, really early actually. But and then I had brothers and sisters who had families and things like that. So I got a chance to hear them and hear their reflections on their lives and what they, and my father was really into being really intentional and creating your reality and really dealing with society. He was an African history professor. He passed away, Jackson, just this year. But African history professor, and really being intentional about what's going on in society. We were joking actually before the call, and this is kind of what kind of goes into what we were talking about earlier, Iyapo and Angela, in terms of United States and stuff. But he was really into that, really into family. My mother as well, really into family, really powerful into that. So I grew up with that, and really being drilled into me to really be intentional about how I was living my life, what path I was on, and then in terms of who I marry, really being intentional about who you marry and how the seriousness of it, of course, the love and tenderness of it as well, but also being very intentional about it. So that was really drilled in. So that was one piece. And then understanding, maybe this is a little bit of me, but understanding the difference between, and Tracy, you kind of mentioned this a second ago, the difference between just dating someone, maybe having a girlfriend, and then having a wife. And I actually talked to my sons about that too. I have a son that's 19 and we have a son that's 15. And I'm really kind of talking to them about this now and kind of passing this down to them, being a similar intentionalness about what they're doing. And this bit of a manhood thing, but being, really being careful about what you're doing. I put it like that, really being careful and really being, making sure you cross your T's and dot your I's type of a thing as a young man in terms of building a family. And this is the person that you're going to have children with. If you're out doing your thing as a business owner, working your job, whatever you're doing, your wife is going to be spending a lot of time with your children. You choose incorrectly, what are your children going to become?
Yeah.
You choose incorrectly, life is short. I've heard the saying that life is short, but it's real long if you make the wrong decisions. So you choose incorrectly, you got to be with this person, for whatever time, or it ends, which happens. But just, yeah, it's an important thing. So anyway, so that was that. And I'll just say this another thing on here. Well, two things. One, in the time period that we met, I was another piece that added to and I'll get into the vetting a little bit. Another piece that added to the vetting was I was going through a real transition in my life in terms of where I was in terms of manhood. I was 22 when we met, right?
1998.
22 or 23? 22, about to turn 23. So I was making actually a shift in where I was kind of raised, the path I was kind of raised to be on. I was making a shift off of that path of kind of traditional corporate life, going to school, get a good job, kind of a path of my parents, that's what they were raised on. I was making a shift into the entrepreneurial world. I knew that I didn't want to do the corporate path that I was on. So that was a change. I changed schools. I actually was in school in Alabama A&M, go Bulldogs. And I was there for 4 years and transitioned to a PWI, predominantly white institution, which was to say culture shock, it would be as an understatement. So I was transitioning into that, but also transitioning in my beingness and kind of readjusting how I was approaching the world, how I was approaching relationships, a real transitional period. And I was I talked about the intuition piece. Another big piece and importance of the vetting process and kind of what I did, I'll talk about that in a second, is I knew that my radar was a little bit off because I was making that transition. I was a little out of alignment with myself. I wasn't fully kind of centered. Okay, this is what I'm doing. This is boom, boom, boom. So I know exactly what I need to, do. I felt a little bit off center. So vetting process wise, like I mentioned, I have a huge family. So one of the big pieces, what I'll do with, and I don't really do this until I have somebody that I'm serious about and we're in a close relationship, I introduce them to my family in terms of my mother and my father. So that's one of the things I did on the first stages of it, early stages, I introduced them to my brothers. So in Champaign, I had one of my brothers there. So we got a chance to meet her. And he's a traveler like us. He's actually in Malaysia right now, but he got a chance to meet Sekile. His name is Malcolm. And shout out to Malcolm if he watches this. I shared it with him, so hopefully he's watching. But so he got a chance to meet her, and that's a big part of me. How my potential wife interacts with my brothers, my sisters, is huge. So she got a chance to meet my brother. She got a chance to actually, like I mentioned, we had a strong connection. So actually I introduced her to my mother, which I didn't do very much with very many young ladies. Got a chance to meet my mother, and that was huge, and my father. Because my father's a handful. He's I for you doing the jokes you're cracking and stuff. He does the same type. He would do the same type of stuff. He'll crack me up. But really kind of putting people through the ringer. He's really good at that. But anyway, she got a chance to meet them. So that was a big part of the vetting process as well. Another part of it was on the personal level. One of the things that I like to do on the philosophy of mine is I'm not really I'm a little bit more, kind of slow Virgo, a little bit more, I get caught up in my analytics a little bit, but I really like meeting someone and getting to know someone on a really casual level. I feel like you can kind of get to know somebody with their guard down. They're not coming like on a date. You kind of come in a kind of formal setting. You kind of put your representative out there. That's what I call it. You put the representative out there. For 2 hours, you can act right for 2 hours.
Right.
So I really like me and Sakila were actually just really friends
Just
and just
platonic
around each other,
friends.
and genuinely friends. Not today's complicatedness
Yeah.
friends.
No friends of benefits.
Right, no friends with benefits, actual friends. So I got a chance to see her in her space with her friends, hanging out, and kind of how she interacted, all that kind of stuff on a personal level. So that was part of the vetting too.
Right.
Didn't really ask a whole lot of other folks about her, like I said, other than my brother and one of my other brothers who I'm closest to, actually in between me and Malcolm, brother named Oliver. So interacting with them and kind of getting analysis from them. But that was all part of the vetting process with me. And I think that I'll just share this out, kind of throw this out as far as a kind of little bit of a commentary on society. I think that's one of the, excuse me, I'm gonna get a little bit more, little heavier and serious here. But I think that's one of our issues in our community now, is that we don't really have that vetting process of our fathers, of our mothers, really helping young people to choose who their partner is going to be in life, especially when you're talking teenagers, 18, 19, 20, trying to decide something, as you're, yeah. So if that makes sense. So as well, just to kind of, I think this is a part of it, but also the development as far as manhood and some of the challenges I was going through. Hopefully I'm helping my sons navigate that a little bit better. That's one of my intentions as a father right now, is to help them kind of to navigate that and do sort of a informal rites of passage with them. And we've actually gotten them involved with some formal rites of passage in the United States, and we plan on doing some more with our children and with us, actually. I think that's another integral piece in terms of your personal journey, is really helping the transition from, I talk to my sons a lot about going from boy to young man to man, into more of a kind of I could call it the grandfather, from father to grandfather, even going from a man who's single in a warrior space into the man who's, we can call it the king. I think king gets overused, but I'll use it, into that kind of a king space, and then even into the almost like an elder sage kind of a space as we move transition even further into our elder kind of energy. But I feel like I believe, and I not necessarily feel like, but I believe, and we operate in a space that we work to transition ourselves and to help our children to navigate through the lives. Our young ladies as well. We have 2 daughters as well. Help them as well to go from the different stages in life. And I feel we operate in a space that is really important to navigate those transitional spaces, to really be able to operate most effectively and to get the best outcomes in your life through those transitions.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I like what you're speaking to, because we're gonna talk about cycles, because the cycles that we have individually when you're in the confines of a relationship or in a family, they then affect the cycles within your marriage, within, as you are raising your children. So I like that you kind of transition within that. Before we talk about the cycles, though, I want to ask the ladies, did you vet your husbands before? Was there a vetting process? Angela, was there a vetting process?
Yes,
Okay.
but one of the things that I remember my mother's husband saying to me when I first started like dating seriously years ago, before my second husband, he said that when you meet somebody and you like them and you ask them out, he was talking from his perspective, you just have to hope that the person who shows up on the date is the same person that you met and you really liked. And then if you're dating somebody and you really like them and you want to get into a committed relationship, you have to hope that the same person you've been dating and you like is the same person that ends up in a committed relationship with you. And the same thing when you go from being in a committed relationship to a marriage. And so there is, I guess, that kind of struck me, because I remember people saying, me and my husband were together for 20 years. And then as soon as we got married, all of a sudden the pile of clothes started piling up in the corner. And I don't know what happened, because, as we move into different, we're already talking about cycles, but there are different things that go on in our brains that we may not even be conscious of, may not be able to discuss or anticipate before, but you may, I got married. so there's a big element of trust for me, that, or like that leap of faith. So I had already said I couldn't vet him in some of the ways that I was used to vetting people before. Because I remember key things that people said to me in my previous relationships, in my previous marriages, where I was like, okay, he's a good dude.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have anybody to say that to me other than me, in this situation. So that type of vetting, we met people, we met our people, and I'm
Right.
always, attentive. I'm always attentive. Oh, I can see. I'm always attentive to how people interact with people, and
Yeah.
that's part of the way that you get to know them. When you can watch them when they don't know you watch them, you can figure out kind of who they are and how they move. So
Mm-hmm. So, Sakile, what about you? Was there a vetting process for you?
Absolutely. So, I have my handy dandy manifestation list and my vision board for my husband. But then also, what was key is we were friends. So I got to see him in other elements, which were awesome. But what really sold me was meeting his mom. So when I met, okay, so, he's one of the youngest, right? And he was the last one that was available. I mean, like, all his brothers were like married and successful and had beautiful families. And his mother, she was an angel. She was everything that I wanted to be in a woman, in a wife, as a mother. And so when I met her, I'm like, I need to marry him so she could be my mentor. I was like, I cannot lose her.
So it's all about the mother.
Great
But
show.
and of course, he was amazing. He's everything. I love him. And, we have a lot of respect. But the mother, your mother. And then it's so funny because of all the siblings, they say that I am the most like his mother. And I love and adore your mother. Like, she's like the world to me. And so, like, that was a big thing. But then also, I'm very business minded. I'm very strategic also.
Pragmatic,
Yeah,
yeah.
very pragmatic when it comes to things. So when we went into a relationship, we had a mission statement for our marriage. Like, what did we want to create as a family, as a couple, with our children, with our community? We had our 1 year plan, we had our 5 year plan, we had our 10 year and 30 year, like what we wanted for our children, for our grandchildren, and what we wanted to give for the world. So even though, you know, things may happen, like, oh, clothes may not pile up or things, we knew what we were going to create. And we knew that, what we were creating was bigger than us.
Mm-hmm.
So we would figure out what to do, but we had something to be together that was bigger than us. So it didn't matter if there was ups or downs. We're going to stick together because we had a mission, we had a purpose that's much bigger than our individual egos, or I like you today and I don't like you tomorrow. So I fell out of love with you, or any of that. I'm like, it's beyond love. Of course, there's always that love, but it was bigger. We had a mission, we had a purpose. This was our passion, our goal, and we were very clear on it. So no matter what happens, we're gonna work it out because it's bigger than us. So yeah.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
No, yeah, I was just gonna say that I think really throughout our marriage, that's one thing that we really have come to understand is the intentionality it really takes to forge forward as a couple, to forge forward in this world with children and as a community, to really kind of build that relationship throughout those, what you were talking about, the cycles,
Mm-hmm.
and to continue to look at those things and have something to forge forward to towards, because there's a lot of times that you'll get sidetracked with life, with a lot of different things, but when you can pay attention to that intentionality and what you guys promised each other before all those struggles start to kick in, this, you have something to hold on to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's a good thing. So, anybody who's listening, there's so many jewels being dropped here. And one of those things is the vetting process. I think that the way that Vernon even described it as being like the system that being systematic with how he vetted, but also like even that mission, the mission statement, like having a mission statement for your relationship and for your family is also something. I see a question here. So this must be like to Angela and Iyapo, because y'all were kind of doing the social media, more of the social media thing. So what does vetting through social media look like?
You want, you want to take that
I
first?
mean, I think I already talked about it a little bit, so maybe
Yeah.
you have
For,
something.
for me, to be honest, like I said, I didn't really like run any kind of checks or anything like that. For for me, I'm the oldest one here. I'm like 61.
Is
And
anybody older than 61 in the room?
ain't nobody older. Right? They're like half my anyway. So and it's not that I don't know how to use tech, but I feel I don't know. I feel that having a one-on-one relationship with someone and really getting to know them, and that I think in the absence of vetting someone in that way through social media, um, you kind of have to look at it like this too. 40 years ago, you didn't have that. So what did they do? People got to know each other. They sat down and they talked. They compared notes, sometimes literally, sometimes figuratively, and to see if both people are moving in the same direction, if they want the same things out of life, uh, if uh, if they're compatible in those ways, and if the person that they're getting with has what I think are still called deal breakers. And so for me and Angela, we also have our mission. We have the same. We're moving in the same direction. We're all about um, taking what we want to do is get control of our narrative. That's our lane. Like everybody has their lane, and it took me longer. I'm kind of embarrassed to say how long it took me to really figure that out. Is that everybody has a lane? They just need to find what their lane is and stay in that lane. And my lane, our lane, is getting control of our narrative, helping our people to see who we are, not through the lens of people who hate us, but through the lens of people who love, honor, and respect us. So, but to the question, I honestly don't know what betting would. I know what people do, but I just didn't do any of that.
Gotcha.
I just chose to like have it totally be one-on-one and get to know her like that, and it's working out so far.
Yeah, I think social media vetting, it is only like a little aspect of it, like very minor. That might be, how you go through stages, because I know when he was becoming a software engineer, he had to go like through all the stages of, what's it called, getting the job. I can't even think.
Oh,
I've been out of it so long. I can't even think of it.
interview
Interviews.
process. Yeah, yeah, interview process.
Interviewing.
Yeah.
And so there was like so many different interviews. So before you talk to the what's it called, recruiter, before you talk to the recruiter, is like they have your resume. So that's kind of like what I look at social media as, is like that's the first part, is like the resume. And then after that, you got to get to know the person, you got to get to talk to the person, you got to know what that person do, what they have on their resume, can they really back it up. And then if they have terrible things on their resume, you're not going to even give them a chance at all. And I think that's where a lot of us get into trouble. Well, not us, but those other people who are still doing that, they get into trouble because they might excuse some of the things that are on their resume, the social media being your resume. And then when you get into the relationship, then you kind of other things, a lot of red flags. I think red flags are tend to be ignored a lot, and I think it goes back to what Vernon was talking about with the rites of passages. Like, we have to have those. Even having those family units, being able to properly vet, having the father or the mother, and having those in our lives to say, like, these are some of the things that you're picking up on. But I guess, as far as your kids go, Vernon and Sakila, are there some things that you tell them about vetting within social media?
Yes.
I'm not on social, like, they're not really on social media. Like, we don't have them on social media. That's one thing. I mean,
Yeah.
we have like this TV for decoration. I'm on it, but we don't turn on the television. I
Yeah.
only use social media for business. So, yeah.
So so that's part of it. So that's part of it is they actually don't interact on social media as heavily as
Mm,
most of their peers. Most of their peers have a smartphone, have a tablet. They got multiple profiles on multiple sites, and they're on it constantly, and whatever, really interacting. So this is one of the pieces. So one is they're not on there a whole lot like that. So that's one part.
mhm.
Second part of it is the actual conversation about, because it's kind of inevitable. They can't be completely not on it, especially as they get older. They actually, three of them are apprenticing with me right now in real estate. They work with us as well in Embrace Your Free. And then the fourth is actually in training. He's going to be joining me. Hopefully, he gets through his training. I'm trying to light a little fire on him so we get through it, so we can actually start helping us out too. My 15-year-old, our 15-year-old. But we actually do talk about the whys and what for. This is something I got from my mother and father, that they really laid out why they wanted us to do what they wanted us to do. My father I really clearly understood what my father's intentions were. I really clearly understood what my mother's intentions were. I really understood what their values were and the principles. I understood why. I understood why they didn't like certain movies. I understood why they didn't like certain friends or certain people that were in the neighborhood. We really had a clear understanding. It wasn't a lot of guesswork in terms of my parents and what they how we interacted, our communication. So me and Sakila do something similar with our children. They understand how we feel about social media, and I won't go into the full. It's a kind of a longer thing. I'll spare everybody that, but they understand our thoughts on social media and in terms of who they're interacting with on social media and how, like you mentioned, that it being a resume and people kind of curate or people kind of creating these personas for themselves. Literally, they call it avatars.
Yeah.
Literally creating avatars. So we talk to them about that. We remind them about that. We remind them of sort of the nature of the tool that social media is, the nature of the beast, so to speak, and that it can be a good tool, much like many things in life. It can be a great tool, but it's a horrible master. A great,
Mm,
powerful tool, poor masters is another saying that goes on that. So we really talk to them about that and really encourage them, and really, especially as they get older, we're not necessarily, and they have to kind of make some decisions now, but we try to arm them with the wisdom and with some understanding so that they can make, once they do get on social media, like they'll do YouTube sometimes for educational stuff and with business stuff. And so we'll source YouTube and they'll get on YouTube. So they're on social media to a degree now, but we really try to arm them with an understanding. And if they do stray and do some other stuff off-wise, we'll talk to them about it and really try to help them to understand what the beast is, what the realities of social media is. So kind of like you mentioned, so they understand that it's just a resume. It's just a
yeah.
resume. But then also on their side, on what they're putting out there, it's a permanent resume. Whatever you
Yeah.
put on social media, and software engineer, you probably know this more than all of us. What you put out there is out there
Hmm.
for perpetuity as long as we got computers and servers. So
You can't
don't
delete
post
it.
recklessly.
You can't delete it, but
Even
it's
if
still
you do
out.
it real quick. Like, yeah.
So understand. So we're kind of raising them kind of how we were raised in terms of talking to people face to face,
Yeah.
understanding who people's parents are, all those kind of things, seeing them interact, kind of like what Angela was just talking about, really seeing them interact with other people, and seeing them in a casual setting. So we're kind of raising them in that way. And social media is just kind of a nice introduction, almost like a business card or a resume. but
Mhm.
yeah, so we're really talking to them about that.
Yeah, so even our daughters are really, really excited because they're like, we're looking like we're ready for our husband, and they really want our input. So we make sure that we like go to events where there's high level Black men that are, husband like, who have the skills, and getting them in those environments where they can meet a mate. So, and yeah, face to face. So we take them to like real estate events, mindset events, Black excellent events, to, start getting to connect with high level young men. So just
Let me-
introducing
Can
them.
I share something that was shared in the chat? I actually got the chat going. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but I see the chat. Someone shared something about patriarchal, matriarchal, mentioning, we were talking about father, mother. So I'm going to share something a little bit, and maybe this will be a little clarity for that person who was talking on there. But then, just share this in terms of our conversation here. So the way that this is my view on it, I love to hear everybody else's as well, but this is not kind of my view on it and kind of how I was raised in this. So when you're so for me as a son, bringing a young lady to the household, my father my father kind of talked to us about how to select a young lady. So when we bought a young lady, he wasn't necessarily trying to select her for us or tell us, unless it was a serious red flag that we're missing. But in general, he was kind of chill. My mother, on the other hand, when I brought a young lady over, my mother was very selective. Especially me being I'm actually my mother's youngest child, but me being her baby,
Yeah.
she's very particular, and all of her boys. She's very particular about the young lady. So she's really a lot more. So when I mentioned her meeting my mother, that's why I mentioned that. Um, I told my sisters it was the other way around. My father was very particular and would take the young man and sit with them and kind of really put them through the ringer. When my
Right.
sister brought a man to the house or a young man to the house. So it's so understanding that the dual nature of relationships and in this situation vetting. I just wanted to share that it was actually it's not necessarily a matrilinear or patrilinear.
Yeah.
From my understanding of the African traditions, it's really an amalgamation of the masculine and the feminine, and that's one of the beautiful things about our continent, and our ancestors, and I believe what we kind of carry forward is it's really in our healthiest state anyway. It's an amalgamation of the masculine and the feminine and the divine to create our families, our children, our villages, our communities, and that's really what makes us powerful and able to do the things that our ancestors have done, and then also we have done around the world and continue to do. It's that amalgamation, and I think that's one of the mistakes that we make in our. I'm sorry, once again, getting off track a little bit. In
No,
our
you're good.
current society, appreciate it, but in our current society of really kind of really worrying about matrilineal, is it patrilineal? That's really a misrepresentation and really can be um, a distraction and can create problems when you overly focus on one part of the necessary combination of things. If that makes sense.
Holistic.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm smiling because we were having this conversation earlier. Yeah.
It's,
So
it's a real problem in our society today. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, it's a real issue on both sides, on both ends of
Yeah.
it.
And to some of what you're
It's
talking
really out
about.
of balance now. It's out of harmony
Yeah.
in a lot of situations.
I want to add on to it when you were talking about like your mother. Like she really did put me through the ringer of 100 questions, literally. And then she would ask me questions in the same question 5 different ways. So I look younger than I am. So when I started courting her son, she thought I must have been 12 years old or something. So she'll be like, "Oh, what year did you graduate from high school? What year did you start college? Oh, what year did you go to eighth grade? Oh, how old were your parents when they got married? How old are they now? When did your parents get married? How old were they when they had you? How many years after that?" I mean, she was like asking the same question
Yeah.
to make sure that you like,
Right.
yeah,
My mother was the
she was
master.
on it. And then she programmed me. So I remember when recording, you like yelled back at me. And so I was like, what? And she was just like patting me on the leg and was like, yes, dear. It's yes, dear. And I'm like, well, he just said, it's yes, dear, very corrective. And then she like laid it down like, okay, the way we do it is you date, then you get married, and then you have babies in that word. You get it with me. We date, we get married, we have babies, right? Okay, and what are we gonna do with our babies when they're born? Breastfeed. Yes, we're gonna breastfeed our babies because breast is. But like she was like literally programming us, like me versus, and she did with all of the daughter-in-laws, you know. And she like there was some of the daughter-in-laws that were absolutely against breastfeeding, but guess what? Every single one of them breastfed because she programmed
Almost,
in, you know, you're
yeah.
going to cook for your husband. This is how you're going to talk to your husband. So it's really nice to have that mentorship on what a wife looks like, what a mother looks like, how she runs the house, how to conduct yourself with the family, outside of the family. Like, amazing. Like, we need that. We like so need that.
And I,
So,
I want to throw this in here. That's how I was raised. My parents and my mother in particular, but my father too. Like I said, every day my father would break down the news. He would break down TV. He would break down things I was saying. If I said something off, he would challenge me on it and correct me. My mother would, like just like she said with her, my mother repeatedly told me that my dark skin was beautiful. This in the 80s. Dark skin was, you know, we were, you know, it was, you know, the elder barge and them were killing us. So for my mother repeatedly, so I never had an issue, and I was kind of surprised when I went to school and kids would make jokes. That's a whole other conversation, but I had it was a surprise. It didn't hurt my self esteem. I was just shocked that you don't understand how beautiful I am. You know what I'm saying? You're clearly an idiot. But my mother really repeated, and like I mentioned, I grew up on the South Side. I just want to throw this in there. I'm sorry.
in Chicago.
Well, I mean, I apologize for that, but let me know if it's too much. But we grew up South Side. As I said, 14 of us. I'm sure everybody heard that part of it. South Side of Chicago. We know all the stories. Everybody talks about Chicago. But as my wife just mentioned, my mother raised us and kind of repeated that same thing like she was telling Sakile. And we did just that. We got married. We dated our wives. We got married. We got children. We went to college. My brothers they stayed in that kind of corporate path, except for the one Malcolm. He's a little bit more like me. But we kind of stayed that path of what my mother repeatedly set for us, and my father expectations. So when we did something off, it wasn't necessarily just you messed up, you're whatever. It was you're not acting like who you are, and that's disappointing. So it was more like a damn, excuse my language. But so it was like when I did something that was whatever teenagers or 20-year-olds do, right. It was I knew what my mother expected of me, and I knew I was off path, and she would just remind me of that. And depending on what I did, she'd be upset about it, but it would be more of a reminder of how much how disappointed she was in me. And that was really powerful. And this is a little bit of a side thing, but and I think this kind of goes into marriage too. Our programming ourselves and really setting ourselves for expectations on a really deep level, I think is really necessary because life, Sakila kind of touched on this, life is going to happen. Things are going to come up. You're going to have disagreements. You're going to not like each other potentially for a minute. You're not going to feel that lovey-dovey feeling all the time. Mm-hmm. But at a deep level, you can get it and program yourself in terms of what you're creating and what you're doing together. It will, this is the study right now, anyway, I've heard anywhere from 90 to 95% of our actions are subconscious. Mm-hmm. So we're not as in control as we think we are on a conscious level, right. But we are in control fully on our deeper level, in our God selves, we're in full control. So we're connecting with your God self and with your connection to source, and with the ancestors, and really getting that connection strong, really setting that program so your subconscious mind really acts in that way. I feel like I believe, and
Can y'all hear me?
We can still hear you.
We can still hear you.
All right, so they're Brian and Sakila, y'all are frozen.
And honestly,
okay.
Now I went with that. I'm sorry to go on that little bit of a rant there. Sorry about that. I'll pass on.
I'm glad that you spoke to that. And even understanding those things that we do on a subconscious level, that's very important because we bring those things that we do subconsciously, we bring those into our relationships, we bring those into even our parenting. You have to even start understanding how those things happen in your parenting. And so that's why when we are and I, more about the future generation and how they're even learning how to communicate. And I brought this up earlier in the conversation about how the like when you are there's a lot of lack of communication. So I like how you even talked about how you even, with your children, they don't have, because that's how we are with our children. They be like, we can't, they'll go to my daughter will go to dance class and be like, oh, such and such was watching this. I was like, okay, that's good. We just, social media, none of those things that they have, just because we do want them to learn how to communicate with them, with their peers, and with everyone else, without all of those distractions, because we see how those communication skills are starting to lack, where people are not able to hold just conversations. Everything is like, maybe few words and then emojis, right? I know when I was working at a high school, and the girl was like, oh yeah, I just communicate with emojis. She was like, there's an emoji for everything on how you feel. So that's how I have conversations, with emojis or with the gifts, instead of actually having those conversations. And when I was in college, there was a professor who was saying that our communication skills and writing skills were actually starting to get worse because of the us being in a digital age and things like that. So I think it's important that if we want our children to be better at communicating and having these relationships, because there is a lot of talk, especially in the social media spaces, like with us not able to communicate, men and women, black men and black women have a hard time communicating. And then we have to understand, especially like because y'all have been married the longest, and the things that y'all are saying, it just goes back to, yes, we have social media, yes, we have all of these platforms, but y'all are still saying do it the old fashioned way. So, so I think that is important, even with Angela and Iyapo. Y'all are saying the same thing. Yes, we met on here, but this is not how we actually journey to us. We got to know each other off of social media. So I think understanding that is really big, in us developing relationships, because a lot of stuff is going through social media. So I want to go ahead and talk about cycles, because there's something called that we learned 777, where it talks about the different that as you the 777 rule, I think it's called, but it's all about every 7 years that you go into a new cycle. And so I know for us, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like our 8th year, that's when our relationship just like really fully clicked, where it was like, wow, like where has this been? It was a lot of, we always kind of been great at communicating, but we had a lot, those early years in our marriage were difficult. So I'm not going to even sugarcoat them. It was difficult. And so, but it was like year 8 for us was like, whoa, like it was amazing. But then I think year 14, right? Like we started having some uneasiness.
This year.
And right. And that was also at the time too that we moved, right? We moved to Georgia. So there was some of that as well, because we come from Louisiana to a place like Atlanta, where everything's more expensive, just a lot of different things. He was starting a new job, all of these different things that added to that. So I just want to talk about those cycles and how we transition through those cycles. So would you say that year 8 was kind of like, or would you say earlier or later, that we kind of start really clicking in our marriage?
No, it was around that time. And honestly, I wanna, and especially to the cycles that you're referring to, I wanna kind of touch back on something Vernon said, because the idea that and one of the things I want to say is that it's interesting that people say that the youth is wasted on the young, because when Vernon was talking about that time when he was around 22, and when he realized he was in a tumultuous, like his mindset was a little off. I get that, especially in the idea that um I want to learn from those times, because I remember my father talking to me, and me hearing it in my head about what I should be doing, but but at that, right before that time, and really it was before 22, but it was around my early 20s, where I wasn't listening at that time. I was doing what I wanted to do, but it's funny how it clicks in, and then because you've been, like you guys say, you've been programmed by your elders, by your parents, by some of those rites of passage that you're going to go through. You're going to have those times that you're off kilter, but those times that you've been taught to, that you've been taught, you've gotta give those times a chance to let those sink in. And not only that, um one of the things that we ended up doing was getting to a point where we started to trust in those things, and then not only that, want to teach the mistakes that we made beforehand, and make sure that we correct those with our children. And I think that was one of the biggest things, like the things I knew I hadn't been doing before, like when I was in my early 20s. I wanted to make sure that we correct those things, especially when we start getting to our children, and we start lining out a path for them, just really just like you guys are talking about.
Love it.
Yeah, so I think that one thing that we kind of, because I talk about this, like the individual cycles, because we have individual cycles as within ourselves, and then those individual cycles will affect our parenting, um I'm sorry, our relationships. Because like I think about me as a mother, like I'm at a different point than at the beginning of our marriage, beginning of our relationship. And so now our children, we do have we have a toddler, we have a 3-year-old. But because a lot of our children are, most of our children are older, able-bodied, can do whatever they need to do. It's still it's different than when you are in your childbearing kind of years, where it's a lot of more focus on being pregnant, and now it's more of the focus is like pouring into your children and what that looks like. I wanted to, well, but I have a question for Sakile, but I'm going to go ahead and go to Angela and Iyapo, because y'all are old. Y'all are the older crew. So y'all have different kind of y'all are kind of like in a different phase in your life than we are, most likely, I would think so. So what does how would you say that your individual cycles have created, has it helped, like, do you think your age has helped you be able to develop more of a marriage, like where you're in unison with one another? Or do you think it would be something else?
What is she saying, Grandma? You saying you want some Geritol?
So silly. You are so silly.
Oh man.
Go. You can go first. You had something you wanted to say.
Yeah, I guess I'll loop back to some of the stuff earlier, just
Okay.
in terms of the question about dating in the age of social media. I guess I want to address that because, um, or I don't, dating in the digital age, I don't know what it was, but I kind of feel like it is important to talk about, like, for example, if we look at things astrologically, someone's first house is sort of a representative, or could be considered a representative of who that total person is. But it's important to get beyond that. You could go ahead and vet somebody by looking at, what they have on social media, and that will give you some sense of who they are. But it's important to get beyond that. When you go on a date with someone, as Vern said, the representative shows up, but it's important to get beyond that. So I guess I just kind of wanted to talk about that, or just kind of bring that up in terms of whether it's social media, digital age, or whatever. It's important for us to, dig beneath the surface in terms of getting to know, each other, getting to know people, building relationships. And at this stage in my life, I feel like I turned 50. I guess I turned 51. I don't know, but anyway, I was born when I turned 50, which was not that long ago. I was like, wow, there are some things that I want to accomplish in these next 50 years to set me up for the 50 years after that. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like I'm really pouring a lot of energy into my personal growth and development. And we have a lot of overlap in terms of some of the things that we want to, some of our children, some of the legacy that we want to leave behind that are not literal children, but are things that we want to leave in the world. So I think that in my meditation practice, I'm a Vipassana meditator. I remember when I was in India, and there was this kind of idea that came to me, where there's different stages in your life, and you go from being a householder to where you have to be very concerned with making an income, to the next stage in your life where it's really about your spiritual growth and development and your legacy. And I was just fascinated by that. And I feel like now I'm finally in that stage where that is a big part of my focus and a big part of what I'm spending time and thought and energy on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just wanted to say I'm not sidestepping your question, Sister Maud.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to speak to what Vernon was saying. As I listened to him, I was thinking about the reason it's so important for uh, for live streams like this, for broadcasts like this, for like with Sister Hanifa does, Brother Omawale, and so on, is because as he was talking about his father, I was thinking my father would be almost the diametric opposite of his father.
Okay.
And what I pull from that, what I extrapolate from that, is that we need modeling for young men and young women to grow up healthy, young black women to grow up healthy. We need some kind of a point of reference. Mm-hmm. The brother has a point of reference. He has now his mother and my mother, may she rest in power, would match up. They would match up. Mm-hmm. But his father and my father would be the opposite. But I guess my message to those listening who are like, well, I didn't have that kind of a father and so on, is that there is hope. Mm-hmm. I mean, and look at me. I joke around a lot, but look at me. I have I think I'm a pretty good husband. I have 4 grown children, and I wasn't a perfect father. I did a lot of what I went through was trial and error, and I didn't do everything the best. I didn't do everything right. Had I had that same kind of guidance, I could have avoided some of those pitfalls if I listened. Because sometimes we tell our children they don't listen, but absent the type of training that he had, absent the type of training that he gives to his children, to his sons. When you have a father who is not there, who is absent, find a mentor. I mean, that's easier said than done. Mm-hmm. But find a mentor. There are black men who actually look for opportunities to mentor young black men, mm-hmm. and teach them as his father taught. Mm-hmm. And I'm not my dad wasn't a monster or anything, but he wasn't taught any more than I was. And right. So for me, for my children, and down the line, you can break that cycle. it's not hopeless. You can't that cycle can be broken. And I just give like all kudos to your father, all kudos to you for what you do, for what your wife does. That's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I said that, and I did not answer your question.
No, it's good. I think I like, and y'all don't have to be apologize. Anything that you say is everything that y'all are saying is wonderful to say. It is important because for people who don't have that, if you have to learn, like me as even as a wife, I didn't see a lot of models of what it was like to be a wife. I did a lot of self study. you know, even the ones that were even the ones that were married in my family, those were not necessarily, I didn't want their relationship. So I had in mind what I wanted our relationship to look like. So I had to learn those first few, that's why the first few years most likely are so hard. There's a concept that we are supposed, like, we have this concept going around in social media land, memes, lots of memes, and people will say that person who is for you is supposed to know how to love you exactly the way, like when you find that perfect person, they're gonna know how to love you exactly how you're supposed to be loved. And it's so silly because that that person has to learn you. They have to learn your love language. They have to learn, what your likes and your dislikes and all of those different kinds of things. So when it comes to that, I also had to learn. There were some times where were really hard for me to accept, and I had to ask myself, am I lovable? I want him to give me something, but am I even lovable in this situation when I react, when he comes home from work working 12-hour days? What am I giving him that makes him be like, I don't even want to deal with her right now? you know so I had to learn that for myself. That's why I always preach self-development. Even if you are already in the relationship or in the marriage, I always preach self-development, because sometimes what you think the other person is doing is just a reflection of something that's going on within you. How are you, like, the communication. I was talking to my good sister today, and we were talking about communication skills, and we were talking about how we don't even want to learn the difficult skills of communication. And it's a skill that you really have to learn, because sometimes it's not about what the person is saying, but also how you are receiving it, and asking, why am I receiving it like that? Not always why they're saying it, but why am I receiving it like that? So learning that, I did not have role models as far as wives went. And I didn't see a lot of wives around me. And so I had to learn that and navigate that, as a wife, and not knowing how to. So you bringing that up is a very good point, because some of us think that because you might hear a story like Vernon's, you'd be like, man, he got it, like he had that, of course he's excelling in marriage, right? Because that's a great story to even hear, because what does it tell you? It tells you how it needs to be done. But now with the people who have come from broken homes, now it's like, okay, how do we get there? And so I think that we've had to learn, because I didn't grow up in a two-parent household, and you grew up in a two-parent household, but you also come from divorced parents. So even learning how to navigate that. So I always say that it was probably harder for him than it was for me, because when I was born, my parents had already divorced. They were already split, or I didn't grow up with that. But you lost your parent, they not lost them, but they were divorced when you were older, when you were in high school. So that was a little different. It's a lot more probably grieving process that goes on with that.
Yeah.
So I think that bringing that up is a very important, because that's also in the process of like different cycles that we go through within our relationship, because that's a part of your growth, and how it has shown how you have learned things, and understand how to pass those teachings on.
I do want to say,
Mhm.
that to really to Iyapo and to your point, something that I was listening to that Sakile was saying was being able to, like, for the mentorship and being able to surround yourself and surround your kids and around these things, because they can be, there can be models for you. Because I think when you're dealing with relationships, a lot of times people are talking about the circles that they're in, and then they're talking about the bad people that they're seeing in the circles. And then what happens is they don't realize that you're not surrounding yourself with the right people, and then they continue to go down that same road of, I'm just around these people, these be all, and then they start to paint everybody with the same brush. But you don't realize that you really need to put yourself in different circles to model the things that you really need in your life.
Mhm. No, go ahead. Are you?
There you
Oh,
go.
okay.
I just wanted to, and I know we've gotten a little off track. You have a tight agenda, but I wanted to really underline and emphasize and speak from my own personal experience in terms of learning to be a wife and the conscious, intentional learning that I had to do. When I got married the first time, I remember thinking I grew up in a I grew up with my mom, and my mother. The way that I saw her doing relationships, in my opinion, was I'm good and just I'll step off. And I'm like, okay, so marriage is something different from just dating. So I probably need to be, more like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm telling you, I'm not going. I am telling you, I'm not going. But then I kind of feel like, so I did process that, but then I kind of feel like, I just had to learn over time to kind of find myself and find that balance in relationships. And then the importance of who we surround ourselves with. Finding a mentor is not like, I remember when I was in college, one of my friends was like, oh, I always talk to older women and I always have older women friends. And I'm like, well, can I sign up for having older women friends? Because I don't have any old. How you get that? How does that happen? But I remember this idea of, the books you're reading, the the people you surround yourself with, and how that feeds you. And so there was a time when, after my first marriage, where I was constantly always reading books about dating and relationships and flirting. I was always talking to people who were in relationships about dating, relationships, and how, like, I was just studying. I was like sucking everything up that I could get, because I wanted to grow and develop in that way. And then the other thing is I'm not on social media as much as my husband. Sometimes I come in here and I'm like, this whole gender war. Like, for me, I experience some things as very negative. Like, I'm not going to listen to Sade talk about, how awful her love life is, because I feel like that's giving me a negative message, and I'm not receptive to that. I'm excited to be talking to people about how to build, how to create, and learning and developing in this way, because I feel like it's important.
Right.
The other kind of talking about what's not working, it's only productive to a very limited point as far as I'm concerned. So, I feel like if you can't find live mentors, find whatever type of positive and productive mentorship that you can, and surround yourself to the best of your ability with positive and productive ideas and people.
Yeah.
I would piggyback with on what Angela just said, and I'll say it quick, which is, and this is how I am. Is I don't feel that the way to combat a problem is to shut down the other side or silence the other side. What you do is come with a better argument, or have a better discussion, or give a better alternative. Because just trying to shut somebody down, which is what I think we're all kind of seeing that happen in real time, like on social media and television and everything, is whatever argument people don't want to hear, they just try to shut it down.
And
Instead
also
of,
the communication piece.
right, instead of coming with a better argument. So there's my ride.
good.
Okay, I'm back.
Yeah, so it was something that Angela said that maybe I might have lost my train of thought, but that I wanted to piggyback off of, but I can't remember right now. But
Can I,
yeah, go ahead.
do you mind if I share a little bit more about
Yeah.
upbringing and some important stuff? So, just to elaborate a little bit and maybe a little bit of clarity too on things for folks who are, like you mentioned, maybe folks who are in different situations, or even if you have two parents, but you're thinking of, this was out of place or that was out of place in my two parent household, So one of the things that was key with my father and with my mother, my father in particular, speaking specifically about my father, was some of the most powerful lessons actually that I learned from my father were warnings. There's two types of stories that they say that one of my business mentors talks about the Bible. You talk about the Bible specifically, but any spiritual book. There's two types of stories essentially. There's examples and there's warnings.
Mm.
Example, do what this guy did, do what this woman did. This will lead you to the life that you're trying to get to. But then there's also warnings. Don't do what this person did.
Mm-hmm.
So my father, and I won't, as any human being, my mother as well, and all of us, we all do things that are both the warnings for our children and examples for our children and whoever may be watching us. And those are some of the most powerful lessons, actually.
Yeah.
And so I learned a lot from, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do things a little bit differently in my marriage. I'm going to do things a little bit differently as a man. And those are some of the most powerful lessons. The difference, though, I'll add, one of the things that I think Iyapo, this might have been kind of what you're alluding to too, and I think Angela, you touched on this too. Some of the negativity in our society, in our focus on negativity, or sometimes our interpretation of things. I don't hold it against my father for the decisions that I may not agree with, or that I may do something a little bit differently. I actually am appreciative of him showing me and him living his life. And as a man, I think one of our key principles as men, as fathers, as husbands, as just men in general, is our journeys. One of the key principles of that we have to deal with and that we have to contend with is what can be called the hero's journey. And there's an equivalent on the woman's side, but I'll speak to men right now from personal experience and from my personal study. The importance of our hero's journey, and a part of that hero's journey is always failure and going into the depths. And if you think about the hero story, there's always a point where they have to face death, they have to face their inner self, they have to face a transitional point, all these different things in the hero's journey. And that's I feel like that, I believe that anyway, that correlates perfectly with each one of our lives. And my father's life was very similar. So it's so you hear me speak, and I speak in the glowing terms, these really empowering terms, because that's another actual principle. I speak intentionally, very powerfully, very intentional about my past and about what I experienced. But I do want to share, and it's important for us to talk in an open forum. I will share, and just so I'm not misleading. That doesn't mean that there weren't warnings and examples. You know what I mean? There weren't warnings and there weren't missteps. There weren't challenges that my father had that my mother had. I don't mean to insinuate that at all. And and really have grace with ourselves and with each other, and not get a false expectation for what we should be doing, I believe, and what our partner should be doing. We end up shooting all over ourselves, as I like to say, but really understanding that everything is in divine order.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm constantly reminding myself of too, because we all, we kind of get into the expectations and all that. So I try to pull myself back into a good space, into alignment space of understanding that things are in divine order, and everything is all good, as they say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we touched on about the mentorship again, like with his mother. Like I knew exactly from my upbringing what I did not want to be. And so I went on a search. I'm like, okay, I know what I don't want to be. So who do I want to be? Like, what is the type of woman, wife, mother I do want to be? And so when I met your mother, she personified that. She was like a shining example. So I'm like, she's it. I'm holding on. I'm never letting go. And so when there were the dips, like there was a dip in our 7-year cycle. That was really challenging. But your mother and your father really helped, with the encouragement, with the positivity, with the programming to help pull us through, to like see that, there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel. This is just part of the process. This is part of, there's a book called The Dip. And so you go down and it's like when you're down in the valley, all you see is a wall, but really you just need to keep on walking. You go up and then you're out to higher grounds. And yeah, that's where all the opportunities are.
Right.
So yeah, mentorship, I think it's essential. Mentorship, apprenticeship, like it's really important to always connect with people that have been where you are, that
Yep.
have the results that you want, right? And that can give you a blueprint to get from here to here, in any and every area of life. Like that is a key. Like since the beginning of time, people always did apprenticeships, what we call mentorships now. So important.
Yeah, it's
Mm.
100%.
And that's very important that we understand, because in this digital age we're in, social media, where a lot of people expect relationships to be perfect at all times. And I was talking to my husband the other well, it might have been yesterday, and I was saying that it's a good thing that there was not certain things that we were being privy to, I guess, because there's a lot of conversation, like when you talk about there's a conversations like high value men and things like that, and not understanding the time that it takes, like to get to a and you have those peaks and valleys, like, right, you have those times where things are up and then sometimes down. And so if you give that so much, like even when Angela was talking about gender war and that not being a part of your, basically a part of your paradigm, that especially when we talk about high value men, and what does that even mean? Because if you as a woman and you expect to have this ready-made man when you go into the relationship, and depending on your age, of course, but if I had of been, because I've heard young girls who are coming out of high school already wanting a man to be at a certain level. And then even if he is at a certain level, or both of us are at a certain level, it doesn't matter, but if you're at that level and I can't think of the word I'm trying to use, but you're not allowing for those lows to come. And what does that mean? Does that mean that you no longer love that person because maybe hard times have come? So we are at the top of the hour, so I don't want to hold you too long, but I kind of want to touch on that a little bit, as far as the highs and lows in a relationship, because I think most people have to understand when those things come, because there's a concept that goes around, and me and my husband were talking about it a little bit today, as far as love no longer or never needing to be a part of the relationship. That's not a requirement for a relationship, or that's not a requirement for marriage. So I hear that hear that a lot, like on social media. So anybody who wants to like jump right in there and talk about, if you believe in that, do you believe that love is not a requirement for marriage?
I I think I think love helps. I'm just turning this down. I think love helps, but as you were speaking, sister, I was thinking about people who go to a job and they've been on that job for 10, 15, 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
and they may or may not like the job. But if you ask any of them, it'd be like, well, did you enjoy every day that you went into work? And of course, they would probably answer, yeah, there's plenty of times I didn't want to go,
Mm-hmm.
but I went anyway. When you're doing overtime, when you're tired, when you're sick, when you put your energy into this position, into this job, whatever. And the reason could be because, well, I need to pay my mortgage, I need to pay my car note, I need to. There's a commitment, is what I'm working for, and so it's not the job that they love; it's that they have a commitment that overrides everything else that makes them keep going in and makes them keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I love Angela. Angela loves me. That's it is what it is. We love each other, but even more than that, we're committed to each other. On the days when I might not be so lovable, or she might not be so lovable, the commitment kicks in. But it's not like we've ever had like any kind of knocked down, drag out, or anything like that. But the point still remains that if you're committed to your relationship, if you're committed to your marriage, if you're committed to the vision you have together, then when you start hitting those rough patches, then those are the things that get you through those rough patches and get you over those, because there's, if you will, a higher calling, a higher purpose. And
Mm-hmm.
I think Vernon and Sakile, thank you. I didn't want to butcher your name. Vernon and Sakile spoke to that. They have a mission. They have a calling. You and Tracy have a mission and a calling. We have a mission and a calling, and that's what pushes us through. That's what pushes me through. I know, but I love her all the time. But I'm also deeply committed to
Mm.
her in my marriage.
Um, I actually, I don't know if I have anything to say. What was the specific question? Oh, when there are ups and downs, how do you keep
Right.
going? Is that okay?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and I feel like it definitely, in my experience, takes two people to be committed to a marriage, and to committed to a relationship, and committed to building. So yeah, I agree with that. But I wanted to kind of talk about this social media or this digital age thing. I read an article last week or something that said that nowadays people don't meet people in person, they meet them online. And I was kind of surprised by that because I figured you're meeting people online, but if you see somebody cute out and about, you not talking to people. Like I was kind of confused by that, and it made me very curious. And when you were speaking a moment ago, my aunt, something that you said reminded me of hashtag goals and this idea of back to that first house and that you see
Yeah.
something and you're like, oh, it's perfect, it's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the romance novels, I write love stories, but in romance novels, you meet the person and they immediately know exactly how to love you and they're the perfect person and you just
Right.
fall in love after a little bit of trauma, but you live happily ever after.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not really, that's not exactly, behind the goals, behind the social media images, like the day to day,
Mm-hmm.
challenges of building, a life and building together and creating together. And this idea of like the microwave or the instantaneous, our relationship is ready made. It's not exactly, like it hasn't been like that in my experience. You definitely have to get to know one another and you know learn how to communicate with one another and check back in with yourself and kind of see where sometimes you need to check in with yourself because you need to check yourself. But yeah, so I guess I wanted to say that, and I love you. I don't remember what the
I love
question
you
was.
too.
Yeah, the question was pertaining to love being a requirement because there's a lot of conversations about
Oh,
love not being a requirement in relationships or within marriage. And I think it's really it's towards that whole idea of um that a lot of people treating their relationships um like businesses, and so that when it comes to that, then you don't need, even if you are looking at the next generation, you don't need to love be it, even when they talk about arranged marriages, right? They use those as examples as well. Like they didn't have to love one another. even though I have my own take on that, because I do believe love most likely developed after some time, but they're just saying that love is no longer a requirement for marriage.
Yeah. So I think that's a really interesting concept. And I think it depends on how you define love.
Hmm.
So I believe a lot of people define love as the romantic feelings.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
need to have these romantic feelings versus love before was
Mhm.
duty, respect, and
Responsibility.
responsibility. That's how love was, and that's how we approach love. Like when we got together, there wasn't a lot of, we didn't have that romantic, fuzzy feelings, which I think was a really a blessing because a lot of times I read I read scientific studies that those those emotions that are triggered by hormones usually last about a good 2 years. And that's to get you together to mate so we can continue on the human race. But eventually, those hormones that cause that euphoria and that feeling of love, it fades. And then around that time, a lot of relationships are like, oh, I kind of fell out of love, or I just don't feel the way they just don't do it for me anyway. And a lot of times people go into a relationship instead of thinking what you can do for me, or instead of what we can create together, is what can you do for me? What are you
Mhm.
bringing to the table? And
Mhm.
not really thinking about their responsibility, their duty, and their part.
Right.
So for us, love is duty, responsibility, and respect, right? And so that's something that develops and grows with the relationship. It doesn't just come. It's something that develops. And I love, I probably would have never said this when they were happening, but looking back, the obstacles, the lowest points in our relationships are probably some of the things I love most about our relationship because that is when maybe the feelings were the worst, but we decided that it was bigger than us, that we're going to take it to the next level. And we were able to grow and solidify and become stronger as a couple, as a family. So those things that I just thought were going to wipe us out, that do wipe out a lot of couples, we were able to stick through it because another thing we said is just like, look, I'm here with you. It's just like I can either deal with all my trauma and deal with, whatever obstacles with you, or I can just deal with the same trauma over and over and over again with different people. Because, it doesn't really matter whatever relationship I go into. I bring myself and I bring my baggage and I bring my trauma. And I noticed when I was dating for the short period of time before I met you, it was like, I'm thinking, oh, like they used to say, you're a narcissist, you're that. Like, if I keep on attracting the same person over and over again, then maybe it's me.
Right.
Maybe. So maybe I need to take some responsibility. So one of the things that we talked about in the beginning of our relationship is like, let's not leave each other. I know there's going to be hardship. I know that we're going to have baggage. We're human. Let's just work it out because I'd rather do it with you because I like you and respect you than to like deal with like, oh, there's a heartache and then just try to escape my trauma and I never get to grow. I keep on staying at this high school level because I never want to feel discomfort. I don't want to see myself. I don't want to deal with my trauma. Let's just deal with it, go through the fire and see what happens at the other end. And each time there was growth, there was expansion. I became the next level of me. I became a better version of me. You became a better version of you. We became a better, stronger knit relationship and we developed new skills that we never had, new conflict resolution skills
Yeah.
that we didn't have before because we had never dealt with this situation before, or we would leave a relationship before we got to that level of conflict. So again, I think when it comes to love, what I think people were saying love is not necessary. I'm thinking what they're saying is the butterfly feelings in my stomach, that love at first light, you're the sunshine, you're the reason, you make me feel good because you do everything for me. You just intuitively know how to make me feel good, you
Hmm.
know? And so I think when it comes to love, that's not necessary. But having that respect, that understanding, that willing to put in that work, that discipline, that responsibility, taking 100% responsibility in a relationship. I don't really believe in 50-50. I give 100%, you give 100%. That's a marriage. I'm giving my all because this is all I have. I'm not going to just meet you halfway. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this work. This is a commitment that I made. I'm not meeting you 50%. I'm putting it all out on the table. I don't care if it looks ugly or nasty. Yeah, maybe I might get hurt, but it's better than, not being able to create this reality, this relationship, this family, being able to give back to the world like we want to.
Absolutely. I just want to add a little bit to that. Beautifully said, everybody. Great points, everyone, and much respect and love across the room. Just wanted to share in here a little bit on the male perspective of things. Tequila covered beautifully some of the stuff I was going to say about love and being, but I will say this on the loving side, just to add on to what Tequila was saying, is the importance of being loving. I think is absolutely important, as opposed to just the feeling, as Tequila was just breaking down, and what we're breaking down here. And I think Angela and Iyapo were talking about this too. But it's really important in a marriage, or specifically in a marriage, to be loving. And what that actually looks like for me is a little bit different from what that looks like for Sekile. For me to be loving for Sekile, and this is kind of what I want to touch to a little bit from the male perspective, especially. There's a really need to understand. I won't go into full detail, do a full. I won't rant, but it's really, I really want to encourage the young men out there and men in general, to study masculine and feminine nature. Once again, I feel like that's another thing that's really missing in our society, is a lack of understanding, but also a lack of the understanding that life needs to be a study, and not just a study of our profession or just a study of ourselves, but also a study of whatever we're involved in. So in this particular situation, we're talking about marriage. So make it a study of marriage. We talked about a second ago, the mentorship, having examples, but also studying. There are some specific things, even though we're now in the digital age and things seem to be so changed on the outside, on the inside, we are still men and women. And there are certain things that men and women react on a subconscious level, on a hormonal level, they're realities. And there's a real need for us to understand that. And I think that I'll throw this in here a little bit. That's actually a good thing that's happening in the YouTube space and some of these social media spaces. Some of the men, I'll speak to men in particular, I'm not 100% sure on the women. There are some sisters who talk about this too, I know, but I'll speak more on the men's side of it. This is a good thing that's coming out of what we're dealing with in the last couple of years, is that there are men who are actually speaking about the realities of understanding masculine, feminine, and some of the pragmatic aspects of that, in terms of, we can think, like this is in society days, I'll touch on this a little bit here, but we can think that things are so different. So we just, I'm just going to act in this new way, and we end up neglecting some of the internal base programming that we have as men and women through evolution. And that's a mistake. And that can be a real challenge in your relationship. It can cause some real roadblocks in relationship, especially from the male's perspective. If I'm not doing the things that are going to resonate with her as a woman, and are going to resonate with her on a hormonal level, we're talking marriage here, so I'll speak a little bit on a hormonal level, it's going to affect our relationship. It's going to affect her attraction for me. It's going to affect how she's loving me. It's going to affect those things on a subconscious level. She may not even consciously want to do that, but on a subconscious level, on a hormonal level, if I'm not doing the things, if I'm not acting in a way, in a masculine way, and doing certain things, it's going to affect her. It's going to affect how she's interacting with me. And similarly, vice versa. If she's not doing certain things, it's going to affect on a hormonal, on a subconscious level, maybe not even on a necessarily conscious awareness level, but on a deeper level. And I feel like, and I believe anyway, that's maybe some of the feeling, that love feeling that people talk about, is actually some of a lack of understanding of how to be in a relationship and how to relate with each other on a really base level. Beyond intellectual, theoretical stuff, but on a really base level, I think there really needs to be an understanding of that. And that actually can help to cultivate another aspect of what we consider love, and that lovingness that we interact between each other, the desire, and from a masculine perspective, the desire to protect and to be a leader of the household and be present and be really attentive, really be attentive for your wife, is kind of driven on a deep level, on a hormonal level, and it's similar in women. Once again, that's I won't speak a whole lot on that, but I went with that. We can go deeper into that if probably another hour into that. But I think that's
It is.
really
It's
aspect.
funny, Vernon. You saying that I'll be I've seen myself working over on the computer and doing some stuff around the house, and then she turns at me and looks at me. She's like, "Baby, that's sexy." I'm just like I'm just doing my thing, and she's just looking at me doing what I do. But yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I was telling our son. Like, don't have other plumbers and stuff
Right.
lifting heavy things up in your house, because that does something. Like when a man is fixing things
Mhm.
and lifting heavy things and you
Mhm.
know changing that light bulb, making it happen.
Right.
I'm just like, that's hot. That's hot. you know. So yeah, there are
It sure is
certain
me.
things.
I
Right.
got
And
this.
me being like, I don't like other women cooking for him, like, or like, no, I'll bring my husband his food.
Right. I have a story when he was working outside the home.
Oh my goodness.
He was like, "Oh, some what? How old was she? Was she an older lady or is
Yeah, she was
she
older.
okay? She was an
Yeah, she
older
was
lady,
older.
so but she was an older lady. Brought some food, because we're vegan, and so she was
Oh
like,
no, no, you talking about Courtney? No, she wasn't older.
oh, okay. So she was like, yeah, we bring brought some vegan food because he was like the only vegan there or whatever. And so he was like, oh yeah, I'm bringing it home. I said, who made this? I said, we're not eating this. I said, you better throw that in the trash. I
Oh
don't know what
man.
I live in Louisiana, so I'm like, I don't know what kind of voodoo she trying. I said, I don't know what she trying to do to
Absolutely.
you. Good working thing.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So there's certain things that build up that, intimacy, bringing the food, making sure that the house is peaceful when you come home and
Yeah.
together. There's certain things that, we as women can do to promote that love energy, to be loving, to really, develop that connection. So absolutely.
And that's important that you both said or talking about the loving which is the action, because we were talking about this earlier, and he brought up duty and even that commitment, which is in a sense that is the action behind it. But also understanding it's not about the butterfly feelings. Those things will come and go. So when people say like love comes and goes, it's more about that feeling, that butterfly feeling. Because I do know, like, I can be extremely angry with him, but there are certain actions that I'm still going to take even through that anger. Even like if I'm cooking and I'm fixing the food, I might not go and take you the plate, but I'd be like, here, take this to your daddy. Like it's still like I'm still going to take certain action. I'm not going to be like, oh, I ain't fixing him nothing because I'm mad. It's those actions that you still take, and I can even see that even with him, there's still actions that he's still going to do. If I leave I'll leave the house and we left and I was angry, he's still checking on me, still making sure that I'm okay. And so, all of those different things that we do, and those are the actions behind it. You don't stop loving that person because you don't feel love or quote unquote in love in that moment, but still taking those actions. I didn't know if you had
No,
anything
I
to add to
was
that.
I was gonna say that going through marriage and therapy and things like that. One of the things that really resonated with me was love is action. So what happens is, but those butterfly feelings are it's something that you're feeling inside, but you taking those actions like responsibility, duty, and things like that. Those are the actions you're taking towards that person, and I think Sakile said something about just that definition of what we have as love. And I think a lot of times the way we define love can kind of dictate the way that we look at whether what you're talking about, whether love should be a part of the relationship or not. And I mean, when it comes down to it, if you define it as action and the things that you're doing for that person and making sure that that person that you have that respect for that person, that you have no matter whether you're mad, whether you're happy or whatever you got going on, those are things that you're doing regardless. I think that's an important perspective to have.
Yeah. And even something that you just said, well, you said earlier, Sakile was even like going through those tough times, and how they were kind of like some of the best times. Because I just asked you the other day, I was like, when we go through some things, like when we go through like tough times, or we have big arguments, I'd be like, it seemed like you brought us closer together. Is that a bad thing? But understanding in what you said was that it's not a bad thing, because you're learning. What some of the best ways to learn how to communicate is in the confines of your relationship. A lot of times people, they you end up hitting I think you can hit a wall when it comes to communication, because at the end of the day you have to communicate with someone in order to learn those communication skills, in order to learn how to navigate and get, how do you learn how to get through bad times? You have to go through bad times. Like, so those are the skills that you're learning in the confines of a relationship. But I think we're in this age where people are afraid to jump into relationships. And I think Angela and Ayapo, it's good to even see that even if you did come into times where you weren't able to, y'all still found a way to say, well, we're still wanting to love. We still have love to give. And I think that's important to even show, because we're all in different phases of relationship, marriage, career. And one of the things that we admire that's really beautiful from both couples is, to me, you're kind of like, you've created your own lanes, right? And y'all are both living in other countries, which is something that we aspire to do. And so, how I guess the last question, well, I have two more questions, because I'm sorry. Just two more questions. But one of the questions I would say is, do you think that makes a difference in, like, being in another country? Does it make a difference in your relationship, marriage, and then also Vernon and Sakile, even with like raising your children? So, Angela, Yapo, I'll let you go first. Like, do you think there's a difference between being in another country and y'all's relationship being in another country?
You
Do
want to
you
go
think
first?
there is?
I do.
Oh, well, go ahead.
I actually said this to Sister Hanifa, was that any distance that you can get from toxicity is going to be helpful. I feel that the United States is very toxic, and that's not saying that that you could go someplace and they'll just be perfect, perfect, flawless paradise. But the United States, to me, is ground zero for toxicity, and any distance that you can get from that is helpful. Again, that's not to say, and I'm saying again, as I said on the Sister Hanifa's channel, that doesn't mean that you can't have a healthy relationship in the United States. I just think it's harder. It's more work. Um, just like here, it's easier to eat healthier. It's easier to get out in the sun. It's easier to breathe fresh air. It's not that it can't be done someplace else. It's just that different environments can make things simpler and easier. And I think it's helpful to our relationship. I think it did help to make it a little bit easier, but at the same time, I think because of the people that we are, um, our relationship will flourish no matter where we are.
Okay.
Well, one thing that just occurred to me is that in order to move here, there were some dis. We had to work in concert in certain areas, and so I think that built us as a couple, and that built our relationship. Like, we had the goal of moving. We had the date that we were going to move. It ended up being shifted a little bit because of the pandemic or the
Yeah.
COVID or whatever. But there were, like we sold your video, there were things that we were doing together that were very important as far as I'm concerned in terms of helping us to grow and develop as a couple. So I think that if we had been like when you're working together, I think that that's beneficial, whether
Right.
you're literally working together or, whether you have a joint mission statement and you're working together to build, that's important. So, and then, yeah, I just think that, you know, yeah, being the further away you are from mess and confusion, the better that it is for, building and continuing to maintain something that, is important. I think it's, yeah.
Right. It helps to clear your individual mind, so that you can work together as a couple. Because if you're someplace in both individuals' mind, or even if one mind is like all cluttered with, what am I going to do? What's going to happen? What am I going to go out in the street and get shot? Is this cop going to follow me down the road? All day long on a loop. Um, it brings tension. It brings tension into the relationship, and it might not even really have to do with either person. That's the irony of it. And so, yeah, the further you can get away from mess and confusion, that's a term that I got from Angela. But the further you can get from mess and confusion, the better.
I don't want to be known for mess and
All
confusion.
right.
I'm for clarity, not for mess and confusion.
I love it. Well, I'll start. So, one thing that has always been important to us, I don't care if we're in the US or whatever country we're in, is to be around other positive married couples, So, some people would be upset with me because I would spend very limited time with them because they're single. But I'm just like, my goal is to be a married woman and wife. So I need to be around other people who are doing the same thing, or like building towards that. Right. And so that's really important. And I think currently in the US, 25% of African American women are married. So that means 75% of marriage age. That means 75% of African American women that are marriage age are not. So that's, a staggering stat. So being in a country, going to places where marriage is the norm, is really important. So you're constantly getting programmed by your environment where family values and principles that are aligned with you are everywhere. You get to see it. And so I think that's really key. So stepping outside of certain countries that their values when it comes to family and marriage aren't necessarily aligned, with ours are probably not the best places to be. So especially since we're raising our children to have these certain principles and values. So we wanted them to be around children whose parents are married, who have happy, family lives. We want that to be a norm for our children. That's just what they expect. They just expect, that's what you do. When you grow up, you're married and you have children. That's what you do. But in certain places, now in the world, that's not the case. So when it comes to traveling, again, going to places that reflect healthy marriages and healthy families is so key. So I think that is a benefit for traveling outside of the US or to travel to countries in general in the world.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Good stuff. I want to share three points here, and I'll be brief as I can with it. First point, I want to kind of go back a little bit to what we were talking about a second ago in terms of the challenges that we face. And someone brought up the word toxic, which I think is an overused phrase, which happens a lot in our society today. Maybe it's the nature of social media, but a lot of words, maybe it's a Virgo thing, but a lot of words get distorted, and that just bugs the heck out of me.
I'm with you on that.
That happens readily in our society where they just create new words and whatever. That's a whole other conversation.
Redefine them.
But let me speak on
I be saying this all the time. Why don't they understand us?
man. It's not. I don't think it's that hard, that much to ask. You know what I'm saying? It's literally a dictionary there.
Get it on your phone.
But I want to touch on these three things, though. And one of our business mentors touched on this, and I thought this was a really powerful point he made. He was talking business and interacting with your family and friends in terms of business, but he made a point of saying that he breaks things down into three interactions and three different types, where you have positive, negative, and then you have toxic. And the really important piece, positive is obvious. You know, we know what positive is. Somebody's got your back. We think we do anyway, but that's the more overt positive thing. But it's important not to conflate negative and toxic. And sometimes we can do that. So for instance, a family member may have doubt or may have some concern, or we're talking marriage here, something may happen, like Skila was sharing, like you all were sharing a second ago, some things may happen that in the moment seem, or they are negative, you know, doesn't seem anything about it. They are negative, it's painful, it's disagreeable, it's all these different things. But in hindsight, and which is, you know, hindsight's always 20/20, right? But in hindsight, we see how that actually brought us closer together. It was actually a building situation, even though it didn't feel great, and, you know, everybody wasn't happy and smiling at the time, but it was actually, even though it was negative by definition, it was actually helping us to move forward in the next direction we needed to, as opposed to actual toxic, and not just the blanket statement of toxic that we like to use in our society, but actual toxic things are not building. If allowed to continue, they will actually destroy your marriage or destroy your relationship or destroy you as an individual. That's toxic. If you continue it or you increase the amount of it, it actually is in reality destructive. Whereas negative things, they may be uncomfortable, but they're actually things you need to hear, or maybe a situation you need to address, or whatever. You make the correction so it doesn't become toxic, but that negative situation was necessary. So I just want to touch on that. We kind of talked about that a second ago, but more to the point of what you're talking about in terms of travel. In terms of, I'll talk on children first. In terms of children, really want to just mirror what Skila said, and you know, just really agree with that 100%. But just to add to that. What was it on children? Oh boy, I lost my train of thought there. I'll speak about. Hopefully, it'll come back to me. But I'll speak on relationships. I think Iyapo touched on this a second ago, just in terms of the stressors that can come up, and the less you can, the more you can get those stressors, that drama and things, all that kind of stuff away, the better. I agree 1,000% on that. And that's kind of the big thing in terms of a relationship. Outside of our relationship, being outside the United States, it's palpably less stressful. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, clearly less stressful, and that's one of the biggest issues in relationship. You know, they say finances and whatever the second one is the sex and finances are the main reasons people divorce. But even that comes down to the stress. It's the stress of finances, not just money, but the stress of finances, the stress of sexual, you know, your sexual relationship is, from my understanding anyway, is the actual issue. And then similarly in our environment and things we're dealing with in our relationship, it's the stressors. I'll share this real quick about Mexico, and really just even outside the United States in general. Growing up in Southside Chicago, I noticed this when I was in Chicago, but it became even more apparent when I got outside of Chicago, my relationship with the police. And specifically, and I really cultivated it as I grew into my manhood. I cultivated it and purposely made it more positive than negative. That's an important point too. When I was younger, it was more contentious. I had a disdain for the police, and I would have more negative experiences with the police. But as I became an older man, I learned to look within and not just look outside and police. They're doing this, but really look within. And now I have positive relationships with the police, even in the United States. But anyway, this is still a thing though. When I would see police sirens, it would always trigger a negative response in me. Driving the car, walking down the street, I would check my pockets, make sure I don't want to say too much on here. It's a family show, but I go through a mental check, like what's going on, what are the escape routes, who are they looking for, what's going, you know, is there something about to happen? It was just all these. If I'm in a car, I'm like, man, are they looking for me? Is it all these different thoughts? Who's in the car with me? Is my wife okay? Are my children okay? Now they have wife and children. What, you know, I just go through all this whole mental checklist, and my heartbeat probably rises if there was an EKG on me. My heartbeat would probably rise. My adrenaline, just from lights, not even that, let alone the siren. Siren comes on, that probably makes it even more intense. Juxtaposed to Mexico or anywhere else in the United States, what I've come to realize of these years of traveling, a really extended amount of time outside the United States. Number one, I recognized that response was really strong. And then I realized that they weren't looking for me. And that was a really powerful realization.
Yeah.
I'm actually, and this is something that we talk about.
Oh my goodness. In other
we're
countries.
in other countries, we are the protected class.
We're the protected class.
As the United States, as seen as Americans, we're actually seen as valuable and needed to be protected in other countries for the most part. Some countries, they kind of have a disdain for you, but for the most part, you're seen as someone who needs to be protected on some level. It's a little bit of disdain there, but on some level, they want to kind of protect you because you're a tourist, you're bringing money into it, And then there's another piece as a Black American. There's some disdain a little bit with Black Americans, but there's also some reverence.
A lot of reverence,
particularly if you're carrying yourself properly. There's a little bit of they kind of wonder. They don't know what kind of Black Americans we are. That's something we're talking about today. Are we going to cause trouble? Are we going to be a problem? Or are we the Black Americans who are, which we are, we carry ourselves well, and hence we get a lot of love in other countries. We get people trying to take pictures with us. They're trying to talk, and a little bit too much sometimes, honestly. They're trying to talk to our children a little bit excessively, or kind of, interact with us. It's like, okay, this is getting a little bit too much. But that's been a powerful realization.
Yeah, we're the protected class in other countries.
Yeah.
And because what people don't understand, the African American GDP, or our gross spending for the year, is $1.6 trillion, which is the sixth strongest GDP in the world, right? Ours is equal to the whole, just African Americans is equal to all of Canada, okay? Mm-hmm. When we travel the world, they see us as wealthy. They hear our accent and they're just like dollar bills. What can we do for you? We compared to most of the world are really, really wealthy, especially the middle class, the ones that are able to travel are so much wealthier than the rest of the world. And people see that. And then they, watch our music videos and see us and they just think, oh, they're so cool. Can you sing? Can you dance? Are you a basketball player? Whatever. That's what they do.
Yeah, that's a little bit of it.
That's interesting. That's astute. But there's again that reverence, and they just see us as wealthy, and they're just like, we need to protect you. Okay.
I need to touch on this real quick. On that as well, I want to speak to. We're on the one show. I love the MaatSpeaks. Much respect, and the principles of Maat is one of the things that we actually study as a family. And just want to give that due respect to Maat and Tracy, and you all putting this together. Much respect and appreciation for that. And in that vein, also traveling, let's take this into kind of the Afrocentric perspective. There are those when we travel who understand who we are.
Mm-hmm.
So for that, it's not just because a lot of people kind of look at music videos and stuff and movies and kind of they look at us in kind of that vein. But then there's other people outside the United States who understand history. They actually they almost get a better history of us than we do
in the U.S.
in some instances.
Absolutely.
Other educational systems don't have the blocks and a lot of the BS that we got in the U.S. systems. Thankfully, I grew up with a father who was a history professor, so I learned a lot of this stuff. But the people outside the United States will actually sometimes share stuff with us, and because of my father, I know it. But they know a lot of stuff about Africa that we don't know. Mm-hmm. Like here in Mexico, I didn't realize, in Mexico and other places, in Malaysia, I didn't realize the depth and the influence Africa has had over thousands of years, not just in the last 500, but over thousands of years. Our ancestors have traveled the world, and not just traveled, but established civilizations across the world, interacted with other civilizations, whether it be Asia, whether it be even in the up in the Caucasus Mountains and beyond, interacted into the Americas, interacted with and established civilizations and influenced civilizations on a really powerful level. And there's evidence. It's not just us talking it and blowing ourselves up, but there's actual evidence. There's actual structures in every continent. I don't know about Antarctica, but it's pretty much in every continent. There's actual structures, and even you can see it in the people's phenotypes as well. There's actual evidence of our influence, and some people get that, and that's actually a beautiful thing in traveling, and to have our children get that perspective. It's one thing I was blessed to be able, once again, my father kind of introduced it and pointed things like that out to us. But I love hearing about my teenage children talk about their experiences. And it's even more beautiful than I imagined. Me and Sakila imagined how beautiful it would be to do the world-class schooling before we did it. This is one of my motivations for doing it, and then to travel in the world with our children and our family, but actually experience it ourselves, and then I'll see our children at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and my teenagers see this firsthand in other countries and understanding who we are and who our ancestors were is just priceless. Absolutely priceless.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned Antarctica. I remember just recently seeing Anthony Broder, if I'm not mistaken, was it Anthony Broder? But he was talking about at a certain height there, you're able to see certain some pyramids in Antarctica and things like that. I think that was interesting.
Yeah. I want to touch on that real quick. Time is a little bit. Hopefully, I'm not stepping on any toes here. Time-wise. I just want to say this real quick. So, something to understand for everybody out here on a historical perspective, especially when you talk about the Earth and human beings being here for hundreds of thousands of years, if it depends on who you talk to. The Earth goes through cycles. So hearing that Antarctica has pyramids might sound crazy, and that you're a conspiracy theorist, and then these black, these hoteppers, they're talking crazy. But if you understand history and how the world develops, Sahara Desert wasn't always a desert. Antarctica wasn't always covered with ice. The continents, even today, the continents are constantly moving, little by little. But if you stretch it over 100,000 years, they move tremendously. So the continents have been in different positions throughout history. Human beings have been in different places around the earth throughout history. We kind of get kind of myopic in our thinking and just think that doesn't make any sense just from our understanding of history over the last 100 years or so. But I want to encourage everyone to think more, and especially as Africans, we're not the last 500 years. The Great Maafa, as we like to call it, we're not just the Great Maafa. The Great Maafa is an eye blink of our history. Actually, Anthony Browder has a great. I want to buy one of these. He has a banner of Kemetic or African, Black, or Cubanic history, and it spans thousands of years. Maybe 10, 20,000 years of civilization, not like Stone Age and then slavery, but civilization, thousands of years. So literally, this 500 years is literally almost an eye blink for our history. It's an important eye blink, but it's an eye blink, and we're so much more. And I'm sure you all know that. I see your banner behind you all, and Angela and Iyapo, you all are nodding. I can just tell that you all resonate with this as well. This, but I think it's important to state that as much as possible and make sure we're coming from that perspective. Oh, I want to say, I'm sorry, one more thing. I'm sorry. This is I keep going on these rants, but I think this is another important piece. Hopefully, my father. It's valuable. It's a good way to put it. It's valuable also for us as African Americans and in the diaspora and dealing with the challenges that we're dealing with. We can. You don't want to do too much in terms of looking outside of yourself and putting other people up on a pedestal. But it is valuable to look at other cultures and glean what you can. And a lot of the cultures that I won't name names because I don't want to get the YouTube channel to shut us down. I won't name cultures, but a lot of the cultures that we're looking at, like, man, they're doing well. How they're doing that? They've actually are using our knowledge and wisdom. Their books are actually edits. They're actually remixes. And this is fact. I'm not saying anything.
Right.
This is actual written fact, documented fact. So we can actually see some of our past when we look at other cultures and how they move and operate. And I think that's really important to do. I'll share this one thing. This is a really cool story. I think a guy was talking about these friends that he had from the Middle East growing up, and he would see how they were, and they got in their 20s, and they were driving. They were like working in this. They had like a store or something or a restaurant, and they're working there, but it's like a little convenience store. But these young men were driving. It's like a couple of brothers, and they were driving like supercars, like Ferraris and these high-level cars. He's like, how the heck are you working in this little restaurant or this convenience store and driving this car? And the guy explained to him this concept, what we talk about, Ma'at and the Nguzu Saba from Kwanzaa, collective work and responsibility and cooperative economics. He said, what you all do is not very wise, and we don't do this. You all have a brother, you and your brother, you'll go get a job, you'll go get a wife, and you go on your own, you got your own bills, you got your own house, and you're struggling. Maybe you do okay, maybe you don't. Your brother does the same thing. You got what we do is me and my 8 brothers, the guy had 8 brothers, me and my 8 brothers and my father and our wives will live in that same household or maybe in a building. We
Yeah.
pool our resources. The wives have take care of the household, take care of the children, do and maybe they have some stuff, other things they're doing.
Mhm.
Both the men focus and pool resources and really go out and really get it, really go out and hustle
Yeah.
and build and collect their resources and do cooperative economics. And then in the community, they do a similar thing community wise and build wealth. And the
Mhm.
wealth, not just a lot of money wealth, but wealth in terms of ownership. So they'll have businesses, they'll have apartment buildings, they'll have houses, they'll have, so on and so forth. And then we see them on the back end and wonder, oh man, these, they're doing all this and this. But it's because of those basic principles. The
Yeah.
principles of the principles of the Nguzu Saba, collective work and responsibility, cooperative economics.
Mhm.
And I think that's a key component to marriage as well. And that's really helped us, and like Sakila was mentioning, our vision, that's really helped us to get through a lot of those low points, is understanding when she talks about what we're building towards is those things, collective work and responsibility, cooperative economics, in order to create, for our family, but also for our community, for our next generations, and multiple generations.
Yeah.
So I can't just get upset because Sakila did something that I don't like when I'm thinking about the next 7
Yeah.
generations
Right.
Mhm.
of my
Right.
children.
It's bigger than you, right?
Or I can get upset, but I'm not going to let that be something that blows out of proportion. We correct what we need to correct, but we're not going to allow it to get out of proportion or to become, like I was talking about a second ago, become toxic. And that's a big thing too, is to managing things before they get to a toxic level.
Nip it in the bud.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I think that's very important to the conversation is, understanding like the generations that come after us, and that what's important. Is it important that you're right? Like that whoever is right in the conversation, or is it, important? Because there's even something that Baba Kaba talked about. He said, I would, let our children see us argue, but also they also had to see us make up, so understanding how that the conflict resolution, and how that, so that they can see that, like, okay, yeah, we might hear mommy and daddy fighting, but we also know that they always get back to that love, and seeing how we navigate those conversations, seeing how we navigate even when maybe we have to take a time out from one another, but also seeing that we come back and we actually have the conversation and talk about it, and learning those conflict resolutions. So last thing, so we can, I can let y'all go, but I wanted to just end with the whole idea of leadership versus co-leadership, because I know a lot of times when it comes to in these spaces, you say co-leadership because I think all of us kind of approach a more African centered mindset, but a lot of times, even there's conversations where co-leadership, that's like a slur to some people, because of what they view. And then, you talked about, Vernon, you talked about the kind of like the patrilineal, like versus the matrilineal kind of concept, where it's like an either or. And so we always kind of approach everything that we do as an either or, versus the, like you talked about, the amalgamation of those energies. So anybody, Angela and Iyapo, if you want to quickly like talk about what you see as leadership, like what does it mean, or who leads in your relationship?
I, sure. Um, what I what I've learned, and I had to learn this through trial and error, but I think there's a misconception among men that being a leader means being the boss. But I have learned in the structure of a family, in the structure of a marriage, if you aren't prepared to serve, then you got no business even thinking about trying to lead. Because you can only lead if you're willing to serve. And serve just means that you basically put your family first. You put your wife first and her needs, and if you have children, the children's needs come before the parents' needs. Sure, you want to take care of yourself. You want to do so. You want to take care of yourself. Make sure you're healthy. All this, I get that. But when it comes to uh, like, for example, when my wife's not well, she can count on me to constantly check in on her to see if there's anything she needs. Do you need me to run to the store? Do you need me to get you something? I'm not her boss. And leading, all leading means is that the buck stops here. We can discuss things, and I know that in the construct of our marriage, we discuss things, and sometimes she has an opposing view to mine, but she will tend to, if it's not like really, it would depend on what it is, but in most cases she's going to defer to what I say. But the thing is, if it falls apart, then it's on me. And I literally just said to Angela the other day that as a man, I have to take care of my family. I have to take care of my household, because if things were to fall apart, nobody's going to be looking at her. They're going to be looking at me, because they're going to be like, "You're the man. How do you let that fall apart like that?" And again, it doesn't mean I'm the boss and go stomping around. Everybody has to do what I say, and that's that's a I feel like that's a warped perception of leadership. Leadership, again, like I said, means that you're there to serve, and um, that, and I know I'm repeating myself, but the buck stops with me as the husband. But there's sometimes that my wife may have to take the lead. I could be sick, anything could happen, and she might need to take the lead. And then if there's a case where we're discussing something and she has a better spin on it, she has a better knowledge base or whatever, then if I'm wise at all, then I'm going to defer to what she's saying, because she may know more about it than I do. And so, again, being a leader doesn't just mean you're the boss and what you say goes. Um, I guess what you say can go if it's educated, if it's within the construct of what's reasonable and what's right and what's going to build everybody up. Um, it may sound kind of like a word salad. I know in my head, I know what I'm trying to get at, and it may not be coming out that way. But to lead, you have to be prepared to serve, also, in my understanding.
I, I think the word might, that language might be a little confusing to me,
Right.
but I definitely think there was a conversation earlier, or, we talked, I think Vern talked about it earlier about masculine and feminine energy. So I don't know, like, I feel like if I was, I would not be in a relationship with someone that I did not trust. So there are lots of situations where I trust you, and I'm going to defer to your leadership or your guidance or your perspective of your idea. But I guess mostly I just feel like I try to be in my lane. So I think as a Cancer woman, or as a woman, there is a way that I move in the world, and there are certain men that resonate with that, and there are certain men who don't. So I don't know. I don't like the whole idea of leadership. I don't. I don't know. I understand that in the context of work. I understand that in the context of facilitating a workshop. I understand that in a lot of contexts. but I actually don't really understand it in the context of marriage. But I'm like, yeah.
And that's what though. That's what makes you so intuitive, because you don't even realize that you're doing it, and you do it, and we don't think that it just works smoothly.
Yeah.
And it's like it's because neither of us go around stomping around trying to. You're not trying to be my boss. I'm not trying to be your boss.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to have a relationship, and we're working to build. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about our relationship, because even when we argue, you know, and we figure out who's wrong and who's right, then no, I'm
I
not gonna
thought you were
say
gonna make a joke. I know. I thought you were gonna make a joke. I knew it was a setup. I knew it.
I can't even. I can usually finish with that. I'm good.
He be doing it with a straight face.
I knew it.
But no, we do work as a team, and and it works right. And like I said, that's what makes you so intuitive. You do it. You don't even realize you're doing it, or try to do it. You just flow like that. It's an awesome, beautiful thing.
So Vernon and Sikile, leadership, what does that look like for you?
Start off. So me being a business major, I was taking back to business, right? So I really think, I believe marriage is a partnership, of course. But just like in a business, they have the CEO and the COO and the other different parts to a business. So as my husband, he is the chief executive officer. So he's the one that has a lot of the vision of what we're creating. And as my CEO, I trust that you are going to make the best decision for our family. But of course, we're going to communicate about them and come to an understanding. And then my role is COO as chief, what is it? Operating officer. So I run the household. I, take care of the children. I do the education aspect. A lot of times I plan a lot of the traveling, but it's aligned with his vision. So I am that support. And but we're both leaders in our own rights. But it's not really helpful to have two heads of a snake, because you end up, like, if they're going in different direction, you end up going nowhere. And so if there's an emergency and my husband says, do this, there's a fire, I'm not going to be like, oh, we're equal partnership, so let's talk about it right here. What's the best solution? No, he says, grab the children and run. I'm going to grab the children and run instead of, the house burning down. And then afterwards, we can come back and we can communicate about it and say what worked, what didn't work, what we're going to do differently the next time, or, so we're going to communicate about it. But I'm going to trust that he has, because I married you, that you are aligned with our vision. And of course, we're going to talk about things. We have our weekly meetings. We have our quarterly check-ins, to talk about different things, from the finances to our relationship to the children, to make sure that things are alignment. We have our weekly dates where we have our time. So it's really important, just like a business, you have those meetings, you have that communication, you have that time, and you have those roles. And it makes things a lot easier when you know what your role is and what component that you play in the relationship, and understand that every role is important and necessary. And it keeps us from stepping on each other's toes. It stops the confusion, and it just makes things a lot more harmonious in our relationship. So, yeah, I'll let you.
So let's see here. A lot of things to unpack here, but I'm gonna keep it to two basic points. Well said, everybody. Sakila,
yeah, everybody,
well said. And
yeah,
honored to kind of share this. Really appreciate you all allowing me to share and kind of be the last voice on the last question. Two things. Number one, the misconception, just to kind of reiterate, we touched on a little bit, kind of think folks are kind of talking about the misunderstanding of leadership in terms of marriage specifically. And then number two, kind of the African system of the nature of man and woman, and particularly marriage coming together. So number one, the misunderstanding. I think this is a really important point. I think Iyapo really touched on this. Really understanding that what actual leadership is. That's really important. So I encourage everybody. I won't go into a long diatribe on this, but I encourage everyone to actually study leadership. Number one. There are literally books on leadership. It's in the dictionary. But I really encourage actual study on it because there's a lot of misconceptions around it. And if you don't understand it, you can really, like you mentioned, Iyapo and Angela talked about, trying to be the boss and trying to do all these things that you may have a misconception that society is letting you believe. You can actually blow your relationship up. You can make things a lot more stressful than necessary and really not operate effectively. Mm-hmm. So then there's the African system. Touch on that real quick. The African system, and what I understand anyway, the offshoot is the Asian system of yin and yang. So that's a term that people are familiar with. In the African system, traditionally, I'm not talking about the colonized, Euro, Judeo-Christian distortion of Africa that we kind of see today. I'm not talking about that. They got a lot of weird stuff happening right now on the continent. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about our ancestral, traditional African system had kind of figured out this and created a framework around this, which is similar to the yin and yang, but it's kind of more what we think of now in terms, what we think of now in terms of the warrior and the mother. So the warrior or CEO, as Kile put beautifully there, is in a leadership position in terms of the external, and that's really what in the Western world, that's what we focus on. So there's kind of a misunderstanding of what that actually means in terms of the external. And you can see it in nature. I like to use lions as an analogy, but you can see it in the lion pride. The lion will wake up and he'll be kind of chilling around, and as far as if he's with the rest of the pride, he's really just kind of chilling and sleeping and relaxing, or he's interacting with the lionesses, but he's just kind of chilling. He's not actually rah, rah, rah in everybody's face. Actually, the lionesses within the pride are handling the things, interactions between the other lionesses, interactions with the young lions, interactions with the cubs. The lioness is actually the leader or leading. But externally, the lion patrols the perimeter. If another pride of lions comes on the lands, the lion will lead the charge against that. So it's an understanding of situations, an understanding of who we are as individuals, taking them to the human perspective, who we are as individuals. As Akila touched on this, so I'm going to a real in-depth thing on this, but understanding who we are and what's going on in that particular situation and what we're trying to accomplish, I think is key in terms of, and then understanding leadership, how to actually lead. Leadership isn't necessarily real vocal and out loud. It can be. That's one aspect of leadership. But leadership is also of sitting back and relaxing sometimes and allowing your people to do their thing. Mm-hmm. That's actually also a form of leadership, and something that in the West anyway that we really miss as being a part of leadership. Mm-hmm. It's there actually if you really pay attention. A lot of movies, and if we watch the leaders of a household, a lot of times are the quietest, and they're kind of sitting and relaxing. The actual my grandfather, my father, my mother, my grandmother, they would actually be relaxing a lot of times, and the children or the younger people are up and talking and moving and blah blah blah. But or my mother might be more interactive and loud at certain points, and may on the outside looking in like, oh, if she runs the household. But that's not actually the case. So my father may be loud and talking, in which he could, he get on like me, he can talk, or like I'm like him, we could talk and lecture. So we might think, oh, he's overbearing and whatever. In Western society, they might say that, but that wasn't the case. It's in certain situations, my father might be more vocal. In other situations, my mother's going to be more vocal. And that's a really important point to understand. And like you mentioned, like Iyapo put beautifully, and Angela even touched on this, the servants aspect of it is a key component of leadership. And I mean, with this, from a man's perspective, one of the things that all the men that I know and interact with are committed to their wives and to their families to the point of actually being willing to give their very lives. So 100%, 100% commitment, And in that, whether that means, like you mentioned, the buck stops here. If somebody kicks in the door, I'm jumping in between Tequila and that person. If somebody's challenging on the outside on the street, I'm grabbing my older son, Kamari, because he's actually bigger than me, but I'm grabbing him, and we're going to deal with whatever's happening in the street. So with that reality, and this is something that's not talked about a whole lot, but with that reality, we must have a what's the word I'm looking for? We must have some sense of leadership in order for us to operate in that way and to properly do things in that sense. That we, as men, we must have an external, and what in the West is really emphasized on, but it's only actually part of the actual full structure. But we must have that responsibility, but also we have that responsibility, but so we must have that authority. Like Sakila was saying, if I say Sakila run, she runs. If she doesn't challenge me, or or I'm going to move out the way and I'm going to challenge whoever's challenge. I'm going to deal with this. You move out the way.
Like we're equal leaders. We're going to fight this.
Right. That's not a wise way to do it. You can do that. You can do that, but you can do a lot of things. I could walk to the other end of the country. That's you can do that, but that's just not a wise way to do it. And a lot of times in relationships, and especially in the West, we get into a lot of you can do that, and that would whatever we got all these narratives going around, but it's not the most effective and efficient way to operate as a couple or as a family. And that's something that really focus on in terms of what we're doing in terms of our vision, our mission, and trying to accomplish that. We'd say, okay, what works? What has worked in the past? What's going to work in the future? What's going to be the best for our children? What's going to be the best for our relationship? And we're in a happy, healthy state. And we have missteps. I don't want to give a misimpression here of that we're just walking on water or something. We have our missteps, and it's a constant correction. It's a constant course correction of doing things. But we do believe, and we have seen that the traditional roles, we can call them roles, and it's kind of a negative connotation now, but hey, the traditional roles work and on multiple levels. Not just in the sense of, okay, I'm 6'3", 190, so yeah, you do that. But if you were 5'8", I wouldn't listen to you. Beyond that, on a hormonal level, it works. If I don't care what size you are as a man, but if you are doing the things that we're talking about here, your relationship is going to be better on an internal subconscious level.
Right.
People will do things, and because it seems on the surface that it's working and that we're doing it and it's okay, stretch that out over 10, 20, 30 years, and a lot of those relationships don't last, or they're miserable. The wife is miserable. She got this husband. Hopefully I don't get us shut down. But she got a husband who acts. I'll just say this: acts outside of his character. I'll be PG. He acts outside of his character, and she doesn't know why she can't stand this dude. He's a nice guy. He does all this stuff, but I don't like him. He just annoys me. And not in a positive way. Sometimes we can annoy him in a good way, and that actually helps. But in a negative way, he annoys me where he loses all desire and attraction for him and respect for him.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Man, she's a solid woman. She's doing all these things, but I can't stand being around her though. Why is that? Society says she's a good woman and she's a boss and she's all these things, but man, I'm tired of coming home and fighting and we all. Am I not as a man? I need to step up, and maybe I'm just being insecure. Maybe I'm just, but in a nature, internally, it's not vibing. And not to mention, when we get to the children, well, I guess it's important as a marriage. It also affects the children as well, and the interactions with them. So so leadership is. I would encourage. I'll just say this. Encourage everyone to really study it, but also, again, want to really encourage to study our natures, as Africans, study our or Kemetic people or people, however you want to frame us, but study our traditions. Our ancestors over thousands of years have developed some things that we shouldn't just throw away just because we got smartphones and social media. Right. We're still human beings, and our ancestors developed some things that are really powerful and really help us to act in harmony with our beautiful wives, and vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a lot that is important because these conversations are had in these spaces because, we have them in these spaces, but to actually break it down and put the language that is needed on it instead of just saying, oh, you women are too masculine or you men are being too feminine, right? But actually putting the words there where you're talking about us acting in our role, acting in our roles that are beneficial. Because as women, so understanding, right, like the how we all have masculine feminine energy, but understanding what we lead with, and understanding where that energy is better placed. Because me as a woman, I'm not gonna go and try to, lift up a, I don't know, or even run into a burning house, right? Like, most women are not necessarily going to do those things, but as men, especially if that they're, that they're most likely going to do those types of things, and understanding what that looks like in the household, So those things that you talk about as being natural, not only is that on a, nature level, but because when I see my husband fixing things, that's attractive to me. That's on a nature level. I'm attracted to that because I know that him doing those things is an attraction to me, is as a woman on a very I mean, historically, as far as nature and what that means for our family and generations to come. When I see him doing those types of things, and what that also means that he can teach to our sons, and then me as a woman, because I know, like, he's talked about what he saw in me before we got married. Because as a man, you're thinking about, okay, this is what's going. And I think I believe it was Vernon who spoke to this, about this is what it's going to be taught to my, if I have daughters, or what kind of, this is going to be taught to our children, and how important that is. So understanding all of these different things and how they add to that, because we don't need to get into a war of who leads, right? We don't need to get into that, but understanding the roles that come into play. Because I know that there are times when my husband says this is what needs to be done in this situation. It's not a point of, oh well, I don't want you telling me what to do, but it's a point of, I understand that he has to take this role in this situation because he knows better. And I think there's sometimes that he'll listen to me about certain situations, especially if it comes to the kids. It's like, okay, it goes to that the culture, right? Because as women, we we define the culture in our communities, and when Dr. Marimba Ani talks about culture is our immune system, and what is a part of that is our relationships, is our marriages, and how do we create that? Because if we're talking about building, I said that at the beginning, we talk a lot about building with our communities, and building with and creating this next generation, but we lose track of that when we decide that the man is not needed or the woman is not needed within these relationships. So how are we going to build community if we're not getting coupled? How are we going to really, there's something I posted the other day about we have to make freedom sexy. Well, we have to make relationships sexy, right? We have to make people want to still be coupled with Black men and Black women. We have to start making that look attractive. And that's why we have to have these conversations as people who are doing it. Because I know that our children, because you kind of get the message from our children when they say certain things. I want someone like my father, or I want to be like you. You get that message, that they're wanting that relationship that you have. And that makes you feel good, because you're like, okay, they're seeing something from our relationship that they like. They're seeing something from us as parents that they like, that they want to, emulate. And so I think understanding, and I like that you actually said to study leadership, because, and especially studying it from an African centered way, so that we truly understand what that looks like. It doesn't, like Iyapo said, it doesn't look like you're the boss of someone, but it looks like how Sakili said, you know, you're the CEO and I'm the COO. We have meetings, you know, we come together, we talk about it, and then what how the each person execute, because everybody has their role in the family, how each one executes just looks differently. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, you guys, like everybody, Ayapo and Angela and Sakile and Vernon, you all have, and baby, you all have said some very intriguing and enlightening things. I've learned a lot out of this conversation. I want to let y'all know that I've been picking up a lot from all of you. Um, but when it comes to leadership, I think all of you have said some things that kind of resonate with me. One of the things that I really pay attention to is actually my the work I'm doing now. Like I said that I'm a software engineer, but there's a lot of facets of my job that I'm starting to pick up leadership qualities from. Recently I became a scrum master, and basically being a scrum master encompasses being a servant leader, and being that servant leader, you're able to um, basically make sure everybody on that team is getting what they need, and then not only that, being able to let that team work when needed. And I think both couples, you've touched on that. I think and then just studying and understanding those processes um, is really important, because from what I've been understanding is these businesses, companies, they are they're starting to pick up what's coming from other cultures and utilizing it within their businesses. I've seen it with the company I'm with, and it's interesting to see how they're implementing um, African culture, or in some cases Asian culture, into their businesses. And it kind of goes to what Vernon was saying, being able to glean from these other cultures and utilize this to build your marriage or whatever you're building. I think these are really good concepts to definitely implement when you're trying to forge forward towards the future. One of the another one of the things that really kind of resonated with me was the idea of making sure you understand your lane. And then, because I think back to um the Shabaka stone. So just speaking of the Shabaka stone and understanding the Noon, the Ptah, and the Atum. And I think I've talked about this several times, but learning this from Baba Kaba Hiawatha Kamene, he talks a lot about those the thing basically the dichotomy between the and the balance. So when he talks about the Noon and Noonet, the Ka Kaket Ha Ha Het, they all innately have their own things that they're they're doing. So one is infinity, one is finity. So when you're understanding those things, one of the you start to understand, like, one has its purpose and the other has another purpose, but none is more important than the other. They're just understanding how, basically it's understanding how they interact with the environment. So I think when you start paying attention to those things and studying our spirituality, and then um studying our leadership in general, and what we've encompassed, and what we've taken from these different cultures and different facets of life, it definitely helps to be able to implement that into our marriage and into the things that we're doing going forward. So yeah, it's nothing much more I can say, but you guys have definitely taught me a lot in this conversation.
That was very well said too. With the because I think a lot of times, I think Vernon said, we throw around the word like king or queen around, but in the African sense, what does that mean? In order, if you're a king or if you're a queen, having your complement, having your counterpart, if we're saying we're building community, then what does that mean? Who do you have with you that you're building with? So understanding all of understanding that there was somebody said to me a couple weeks ago, they said there's no god, without a goddess. There's no netta, like there's the netta, right? Like even when you talk about ma'at, there's tahuti, right? So studying those.
Did they just freeze
Okay,
up?
yeah, I don't know why it's freezing like that, but I guess that means that we need to go ahead and end the conversation. But I just want to thank everyone for all of you. I respect y'all so much. I, I really appreciate you. I love what you're doing. Everyone, make sure to go check out Embrace Your Free. And you can get the free success guide. Great information. It's helped me a lot. I still gotta finish, but it really has helped me so far just with my mindset. And I share with Sakili and Vernon things that we've manifested just since taking the class and working on my mindset. So, continuing with that, because our goal is to actually be world class, school travelers, where we're traveling the world with our children and hopefully one day our grandchildren as well. So, really appreciate, much respect for what y'all are doing. And also with Angela and Iyapo, I want to thank you. Make sure you go check out. And Iyapo, I'll have to have you back on as well to discuss your book as well. Like I said, because I really want to like get deep into that, because I love me some science fiction. We both do. We love some science fiction, and we talk about how there is not enough science fiction for us. So really having, we want to talk about that as well. Also, our sister here, Angela, she's also an author. She does workshops. What else do you do, Angela?
Facilitation, coaching through metaphysics,
Okay.
all kinds of stuff.
All right. Yeah. So we'll have more conversations, but you can find their information. And but again, thank you so much for coming to the conversation. Thank you for having it. It was wonderful. Everyone said some amazing things, and I
Mm.
just appreciate y'all so much.
It was a joy and honor. Thank you for having us. This was amazing. Definitely expansive. So,
Oh, thank you. Thank you. All right. Well,
Thank you.
go ahead.
I'm genuinely honored, and I mean that, honored that you would have us on. And Vernon and Sakile, it's so good meeting you. Thank
it
you.
was
Yes.
wonderful meeting you two beautiful couples. Amazing. It was wonderful to be in your
Same to you.
presence. Yes,
And
it
Yes.
definitely elevated us.
I
Yes.
wanted to say one thing that when
Mhm.
I started the conversation, I was thinking, oh, dating in the digital age or marriage in the digital age. But it's interesting to have this conversation, and we're in three different parts of the world having this conversation
Mm.
as married couples. I think this is really important, and that other people were able to share and benefit from it as well.
Yes.
Yes.
That's a
Yes.
great,
Very true.
great
Very true.
point. Mhm. So, with that being said, I want to thank everyone in the chat who came out, added to the conversation. Thank you for coming through. Peace to every one of you. I really appreciate y'all. Um, always showing my Aunt Speaks support. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And with that being said, oh, thank you so much. Peace, family. I'll see you next time.